We are live.
All right. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Vaughn. I'm the head of CPG, FMCG, and multi-brand analytics here at InfoTrust. On behalf of all of us at InfoTrust, as well as our close partners at Google, I'm thrilled to welcome each of you to the first ever CPG Digital Analytics Summit. Make no mistake, today's a big day for all of us working in CPG digital analytics, because as far as we can tell, this is the largest digital analytics conference that's ever been dedicated solely to the CPG or FMCG industry. We have a ton of awesome content to share with you today and some amazing speakers, so we want to jump right in. But before we get started, I want to take a few seconds to give some quick shout outs to people who made today possible. And to be honest, I want to do it now because I'm afraid that it's kind of going to get lost if I do it at the end when everybody's excited to get their hands on a new Peloton. So first of all, big thanks to everyone at Google, not only for your close partnership and co-hosting the event with us today, but also for continuing to make innovative products that change the world of digital analytics and media for organizations around the world. For all of our team at InfoTrust, thanks for kicking butt every single day and making sure that InfoTrust is the industry leader in CPG digital analytics. For all of our speakers, thanks for taking your time to share your expertise, your knowledge, and your successes with us today. And for all of you in attendance, thank you not only for joining us here today, but also for the work that you do to change and advance digital analytics throughout your own individual organizations. We know from our CPG partnerships that sometimes working in complex, dynamic, multi-brand organizations like the ones you work in can be stressful, can be frustrating, and at sometimes can be thankless. Hopefully today is proof that while you may be on a small team in your own individual organization, that there are hundreds and thousands of other industry professionals just like you who you can lean on and learn from. I'll be back several times through the day to talk about some additional topics, but for now, let me pass it over to today's master of ceremonies, my friend and colleague at InfoTrust, Brad Pringer.
Thank you, Chris. Welcome, everyone. My name is Brad Pringer. I lead our partnerships team at InfoTrust. So I have the privilege of spending most of my time meeting with key stakeholders like yourselves across this industry to understand your challenges, needs, and helping determine if InfoTrust is the right fit. I've spent the last 14 years in this industry and thrilled to be a part of the first of the kind CPG analytics only event. We talked about this over a year ago, saying there's not any events out there that are for this group, for CPG multi-brand organizations. So know that this is coming back every year, and we look forward to many of you being future keynotes. Not to mention, you're a part of my first ever MC debut. I accept good feedback after the session. Please share. That's all I accept is good feedback. It's important to note this event was originally scheduled in New York City earlier this year. As we know, COVID changed a lot of our plans. It was supposed to be in person, but we also realize that most of you have some virtual fatigue. We're all on a lot of these calls and video calls, so thank you for taking your time. But what we did is we purposely cut this, what was supposed to be an in-person summit, from 8 hours to 4 hours. We added an all-star speaker lineup with some of the most hottest topics in the industry. We added several breaks, and we're raffling off a Peloton to one lucky CPG person on this call. So if that doesn't get everybody fired up, I don't know what will. So let's jump back to the speakers. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Special thanks to Paul, Kason, Bridget, Lori, Chris, and Arif. Without you, nobody would be here. Nobody joined this summit to hear my first MC debut. Thank you for your time, your preparation, your commitment to providing thought leadership to this audience. Also, thank you to our attendees. 200 plus attendees are registered for the event today. You committed 4 hours. So let's make sure this is a super productive session and start thinking about your topics for next year when we bring this back. Finally, 3 tips for our session. As an MC, that's what I get to do. I get to create some rules, some tips to make sure that this is a highlight of everybody's 2020 year. I realize that's not going to be too difficult to be on the top of that list. First, this one's incredibly important. In YouTube chat, you should see a form. It should be anchored at the top of your YouTube chat. Make sure you fill that out. If you do not fill that out, you will not be a part of the Peloton raffle at the end of the day. So again, Make sure you fill that out. Also, you're going to receive a free book we just launched. It's a hot week at InfoTrust. We just launched our book, Crawl, Walk, Run, Advancing Analytics Maturity with Google Marketing Platform. It happens in less than 48 hours. It's already on Amazon's bestseller list. So make sure you pick up a copy today. Be engaged via YouTube chat. Let's learn from each other and let's have fun. Let's make sure this is a really good speaker lineup. Let's have fun today. Let's learn from each other. And again, now's a good time to close out those internal chats, the email, working on 2021 strategy. If you have kiddos at home like me, give them a tablet, put on a nice educational learning program. Before I get into our keynote, just wanted to quickly refresh. I'm not going to go through this. Everybody should be aware of what we're talking about today, but really excited. Please stay engaged. There's a lot of sessions today that offer Q&A. Again, ask those questions. This whole event was around networking and getting this industry together to solve challenges. With that, I think you've all heard enough from me. Hopefully I'm doing all right so far, but I would like to introduce our keynote speakers, Paul Limbury and Michael Lobin. Paul is a managing director at Google, responsible for data and technology across Google's top global clients in health and personal care, food and beverage, technology, and auto. He has 25 years of experience with enterprise and global brands, including working at leading tech firms such as SAP, Cisco, and Hewlett-Packard. He's a thought leader on human performance and has been a guest speaker to several CIO network organizations on the topic. Born in Australia, Paul earned a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Sydney. Welcome, Paul. Joining Paul is our very own Michael Lobin, who's the Chief Growth Officer at InfoTrust. He is an adjunct instructor at the University of Cincinnati, go Bearcats, and Xavier University, and is also a presenter and author with work published in Forbes, Adweek, and CIO Magazine. Not to mention that book that I mentioned earlier, he is the co-author and is now an Amazon bestseller. So congrats, Michael. And with that, gentlemen, take it away.
Thank you so much, Brad. Hi, Paul. Good to see you.
G'day, Michael, and welcome everyone on the live stream and on the event. It's marvelous to be here. Welcome to the home office.
Lovely to have you. You and I met a couple of times over the past year to year and a half, and every time that we had the discussion, I was always coming out thinking, how can I dive more into Paul's brain and learn even more about what he does, his experience, and how he meets with organizations. So this seems like a perfect way for me to pick your brain and for you to share your extensive knowledge with our attendees.
Awesome, mate. It's great. And a couple of comments just to start. First of all, I'd like to thank InfoTrust for the opportunity. It's awesome that you guys are bringing the community together like this in this time to have these events. I'm really grateful for that. For the people out there listening, from me to you, I wish that you guys were here because I learn the most when you guys are doing the talking and I'm asking the questions and doing the listening. So I do hope some of the things I might offer today are of value, but thank you for your stories and your partnership, because what I know is actually just a reflection of what you tell me and share with me. And then Michael, congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
It's on the bestseller list. Fortunately, I've had a chance to read it, and I think it's fantastic. So we can get into some of that during this conversation, if you like, because I've got some points of view with regards to some of the things that you offer up in the book that I think are really interesting for people to consider. So, we might sort of get there during the course of it. But congratulations! It's a good read. It's an easy read, but it's insightful and it's deep too. So, congratulations on that.
Thank you so much, Paul. We'll definitely dive into the book. We're already working on the next one. But before we do so, I wanted to start with getting your just view of the land. What do you see right now happening in the industry? What are your biggest observations? Certainly this year has been very unusual, very stressful in many ways, very different from anything that we've experienced. Where do you feel the state of the industry is right now?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Just broadly with consumers, first of all, in a great position at Google to get exposed to what a lot of the people how people are reacting, how consumers are feeling right now. So there's a few things that that have been pushed on us. First of all, people are getting ready for a socially distant holiday season, which is a different way of operating. So just first of all, that's different. In terms of what people are looking for, from the search material we get to look at, there's really heightened activity around the sports leagues that are opening up around the world. And so people are looking for normalcy with their forms of entertainment, which I think is interesting. You spoke about Peloton earlier. Other things that you're offering a Peloton, that just the trends in home fitness and things like that, I think are things that are driving, and flexible working methods, I think are things that are driving a lot of changes in how consumers are operating. So when you look at all that, people are looking at ways of interacting differently, but still connecting in ways that they were. So it's this really fascinating time where everyone in the world's trying to grapple with new normals. And as we look in different parts of the world, like I was on the phone with my colleagues in Dublin yesterday, and Ireland's moving into a deeper, raising its threat level for COVID. So there's continuing sort of changing landscapes with what's happening with how we're living. And then in the US, of course, we've got a big election. There was vice presidential debate last night. So all of that brings me to sort of three sort of bullets as to how I see the broader landscape. One is of continued ambiguity and uncertainty. So because there's that ambiguity and uncertainty, people are latching onto things like, is the rugby championships, which is my sport, is that actually going to happen? Is South Africa going to make it to Australia to play New Zealand and Argentina? Is that going to happen? So people are looking for certainty because it's still an ambiguous environment. There's lots of change. The other big thing, though, speaking about work, like corporately, all of this is just driving acceleration of decision making. So decisions in the types of organizations that a lot of us on this call work for tend to move at an organizational pace. I think you all know what I'm referring to. Like, we can get cynical at sometimes with regards to the speed of decision making. And what I'm seeing now is a drive to make more decisions and to act on those decisions with more speed and velocity. So I think that is a continuing trend. I think it might have petered off a little bit. Like, there was a real momentum early on. But I do think that acceleration of decision making and acceleration of existing trends is continuing. So acceleration of e-commerce initiatives. Everyone here was working on some type of direct consumer or e-commerce position. I think those things just continue to accelerate, and the decision making within organizations is accelerating around that. There are a lot of data projects and analytics initiatives, and people are realizing maybe this is a good time for us to invest in those as we're looking at those things. So acceleration of those trends. And then the final thing that really ends up just being the drum that I beat when I meet with you all in person is, right now I see this as a really, really strong leadership opportunity. In times of uncertainty, the leaders that have the clearest strategy and the clearest view of their purpose are the ones that rise to the top, and they're the people that the rest of organizations turn to in order to carve our way through these ambiguous times. So I'm really excited about the leadership opportunity right now to differentiate organizations and differentiate careers and teams within organizations during this time. So they're some of the things that I'm thinking about.
So if I understand correctly, we have ambiguity and uncertainty. We have acceleration of trends and the opportunity that all of us have this stronger leadership to differentiate what we do.
Summarize like a man that just wrote a great book. Yes.
So with that in mind, I want to focus on one of those, which is acceleration of trends.
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of times working in large organization, to your point, there is often this notion that things take a long time, require different approvals, and rightfully so, right? Because products of these organizations affect lives of millions of people. So how do you, if somebody would to ask you, well, how do we shorten our decision cycle, right? How do we take advantage of that trend of acceleration? Any pointers, any tips that you can hone in on?
Yeah, interesting. Can I give a grievance first of all to on this? So I think that executives, and it's really interesting. Like, let's think about a consumer packaged goods company and the history of a consumer packaged goods company. Like most of us, they're long-standing organizations. They've been around for many, many decades, established ways of operating. And the senior people in those organizations have often spent an entire career in those organizations. And most of those people are my age and older, which means they're close to 50, or they're in their 50s, or they're in their 60s. So a lot of people have been around for a long time. So I think, first of all, there's a speed to decision making. And there's an accelerant on wanting to make decisions, but still there's an education required in order to take advantage of being able to get decisions made, if that makes sense. And hopefully that resonates with folks. There's another thing about virtual work environments. I'm not sure how many people are still 100% virtual. At Google, we're still a 100% virtual work environment. I think our Singapore office is opening up in the next couple of weeks, and there'll be some people going in and out of that environment. So in terms of taking advantage of that willingness to make accelerated decisions, I do like to highlight that, and this is a poll opinion around how we work in meetings. And let me know if this is familiar with people, and I can't see the comments. So if people are commenting, maybe if I press on this screen, will I see a comment? I'm learning how to use this application as we go. Whenever there's a meeting, Michael, I find that there's actually not one meeting, there's actually 3 meetings. So there's the precursor meeting to the official meeting. That's when we get together. If I'm meeting you at your office, that's when we meet in the lobby, and you take me to the meeting room. And as we're going to that meeting room, there's some chit chat happening. Now, it's like when you're meeting with your CFO and you bump into each other in the hallway as you're going to the meeting room. There's an informal exchange of information. You're finding out what was just said to the controller, or the conversation that just happened between the VP of global media and the CFO just had a conversation, and you're picking up information along the way. You then sit down, and there's an official meeting that you have on a topic. Often there's a presentation. Often we open up a laptop and we do some slides, and there's an official meeting that happens. The minute that meeting finishes officially, there's this third meeting that happens. It's this organic exchange where the pomp and ceremony of the official meeting we were just having has finished. And that's when there's this informal human interaction happens between the people who really have influence or have opinions that move decisions in organizations. And in that time, that might be a minute. Sometimes that third unofficial meeting might happen as people walk down the hallway and get to an elevator and leave the building. Sometimes you'll see people crowded in the elevator well, like talking about what just happened. And I think the one thing to be cognizant of right now is, if we want to take advantage of the entire executive suite's desire to act, you've got to think about how those interactions take place in a fully virtual environment. Because when we have these meetings now over video conference, over Zoom or Google Meet or Teams or whatever your video conferencing application is, that third meeting often doesn't happen. And that third meeting, I think, is actually the magic of driving influence as an executive to get the decisions made that you need to work on. So I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but in terms of things to be cognizant of, is like there's a desire, there's an acknowledgement that we need to act. How do you actually navigate how the interactions are happening to ensure you're getting those decisions made, I think, is something we need to think about.
And certainly it feels that the attention span, right, it's so much more difficult during presentations, during conference calls, to hold someone's attention, because you're competing for attention with so many other things, including family members.
I think as people within organizations who are trying to be change agents, so a lot of the people on this call, a lot of the digital and analytical people who are listening to us, these are people who are change agents inside their organizations. And you need to think about how you're going to be an effective change agent to drive decisioning. And and my belief is the official meeting is not often the best environment to drive the change you're actually trying to institute. So you need to think about, in these virtual environments, how you're actually driving that influence to get decisions made.
So since we are fortunate to kick off this event, and there are many other presentations that will follow, I always find that it's very important to start with an end in mind. In fact, when I personally attend different conferences or seminars, I often jot down here the 2 or 3 things that I'm really looking to get out of the event, just so I can frame my conversation, if you will. What would you like people to remember and do walking out of this event in just a few hours?
I think for me, for this session, and this maybe gets to the heart of some of the things you talk about in your book. We love talking about analytics. Like at Google has loved talking about Google Analytics, and love talking about the functionality. And Google's a very engineering-centric culture. So we love talking about products. There's always engineers and product managers who are vying for time with people to talk about the products. But as your book beautifully articulates, if you want to be successful in driving change, the platforms and the technologies you pick are critical. Without them, we don't have this conversation. But the things that really move the technology and drive the payoff, in your language,
very much so,
right, it is when you combine the platforms with other dynamics. And it's the other dynamics I think actually end up being the more important in the long run. And those other dynamics, to remain with the P for Paul alliteration, which you've done, really anchoring and understanding why, what's the reason that people are trying to drive transformation. So the things I would love people to remember is it's more than just the technology. And I would love for people to remember, as leaders and change agents of what we're doing together collectively, you need to think about the people, the process, and the platforms and how they interact together to drive payoff for your organization. And there's some other steps that you talk about in your book, Michael, that pull those things together. But I would love for people to remember those elements, because if you can really combine not just the technology, the platforms, but with the people and the process, and have a great reason for doing things, and then drive towards outcomes, that's what determines success. And if I look at the organizations I get to interact with, the ones that really move the needle are the ones that get that combination right. And I can see stories within organizations who in one part of the organization is able to deliver a successful analytics transformations, and in the same company on a different floor, they're not able to move the needle. And they might be using the same technology. So what's the difference between the two floors? So I think that's really interesting for us to dig into and have people to understand. So I'd love for people to really, marinate in that and understand those dynamics in their organization and take specific actions away to move the needle there.
Love that. And you mentioned taking a specific action. So we are to make a couple of recommendations for how do we get leadership on board, right? Number of people who I'm sure signed up after this event will have pages of notes, or maybe one page or paragraph of notes in terms of this would be a cool thing for us to do. But a lot of times when you attend a conference, it can also be frustrating because you here's what other companies have done, and you go, yeah, this is just not going to fly at this organization. Mm-hmm. And so how do you get leadership team on board and get this digital transformation going?
All right. let's just think about this first. There's a couple of things. Getting leadership on board. The first thing that springs to mind for me is fear, because my experience of the most senior leaders in business, especially in the types of companies that we're working with here, that we've got large franchise businesses, and understanding the risks and the threats that are coming to us often drive more behavior than carrots, than incentives, if that makes sense. And you might often hear people, are people motivated by staying away from something terrible, or are they motivated by moving towards something good? And, if I look back on my university career, I know I did most of my best study to avoid failing versus, being the top honors student at the university. Now, there is a small portion of people on this call that were probably the top graduate at their university, but I think most people are motivated through trying to avoid something bad happening versus moving towards something good. And just think about it when you buy a TV or you buy a car, or a lot of people buy stuff when the current stuff they have breaks. So it's similar with getting leaders on board inside organizations. If something's not, you'll hear people say, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So when you're trying to drive a transformation like this, you have to sort of tap into those emotions. And so I think, and this isn't negative. This is just understanding that are people moving away something, or are they moving towards something? And I think 80% of the population are trying to move away, stay away from a bad outcome. So I would be looking at what's your competition doing, what are the upstart new brands that are engaging with consumers in new ways, how are they operating, and how does that represent a real threat to the business, and package that up in a way that then shows, if we do the following three things, it will mitigate that risk for us and provide an insurance policy. I think that's a great way to engage with executives. And it's funny, within Google yesterday, we were talking about a presentation that we have to do to some of my senior leaders inside the company, and we actually spoke about that. How do we represent the competitive threats to our business to ensure that our leadership sees that this is the right time to act now on doing that? So I think that's a really important thing to do. There's another thing that I learned early in my career. I had the good fortune early in my career. I joined Hewlett Packard in the early 1990s in Sydney, and it was a great time. Like HP was led by a CEO called Lou Platt at that time, and there's a really strong sort of culture from Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard that it was called the HP way, and it was really interesting coming into an organization and seeing the power of a positive culture and of leaders. And then through that process, I met I worked with a bunch of colleagues who were 10 to 20 years older than me, and I got to see how they navigated organizations, and I got to see the importance of influence and who has influence on who. So when you say then, how are we going to drive leadership change with leaders? I do think it's really important to look at the relationships that you have up and down your leadership chain. And what I find in companies, the companies that are successful in driving change, there's three critical roles that I can identify. And if I'm, not that I get to have a glass of wine with anyone anymore, but when I'm having a glass of wine with someone, we can actually talk about who the people are that play these roles. So those roles, and the language could be changed, but for the want of language, there is a sponsor. Well, actually, let's start here. There is a change agent. There is someone who understands what needs to happen in order for this transformation around analytics and data to happen within the organization. They see the pieces. They see all the pieces on the board, and they've got a vision for what needs to happen. I find that change agent, however, is not successful unless they have air cover from a sponsor. And that sponsor is typically the CEO or the chief operating officer or the CFO. So there is a sponsor at the pointy end of the C-suite that has a great personal relationship with the change agent, who is typically a chief digital officer or a chief marketing officer or a head of analytics. And there's this critical relationship between these two people, the sponsor and the change agent. And the change agent needs to know that the sponsor's got their back. And the sponsor needs to know that the change agent has a vision and a plan to execute that's going to work. So that's the two important relationships here. There's then a third critical role, and that's the role of the champion, the day-to-day champion. The change agent then needs a crew of like merry men. It's now like Robin Hood, and we're in the forest. So the change agent needs champions who can actually drive and do specific activities. And sometimes they might be in regions, because the companies we work with here are incredibly complex brands, different countries, different regions, different structures. So there are champions that are connected back to the change agent. And then there's a line of sight back to the sponsor. And when you get that right and you have those relationships in place, I think that's when you're in a position where you can team together to work out how you get the pointy end truly supporting your initiatives and not just delivering lip service to the initiatives. Because I don't know a single company, for the record, on the list of attendees that you put up here that doesn't currently have a data analytics transformation set of projects and initiatives happening right now. But some of them actually people believe in versus executives believe in and they're committed to, and other ones it's not as rigorous as it could be. So I think there are two things, Michael, to think about. Understand the chain between the day-to-day champion, the change agent, and the sponsor. And then have you put the right amount of the right balance of fear. And I see a comment here in the chat about getting the right balance between carrot and catastrophe. So like it is like it's not a hard and fast rule, but I do find getting that balance right. You need enough incentive and risk mitigation. And by the way, sometimes an incentive is a risk mitigation, not actually it's mitigating the risk that you're presenting, but then having enough fear there that really makes people want to sort of address the gravitational pull of status quo that exists in most global CPG organizations. And I think that's just one that we have to be cognizant of. There is a major gravitational pull to the way that we have always done things inside organizational life. So it's just how do you get that right balance between carrot and catastrophe? As it said here, to get that right, like that's the magic that we're looking for.
So one of the things that you mentioned that I want to build on is having a change agent and a champion. And many people, I'm sure, who are on this call want to be or already are those change agents within the organization. And first of all, want to commend them for that. But a lot of times when you're a change agent and when you bring something to your organization, there will be a question, well, what is the value, right? So what is the value of analytics? Why should we be investing in this? If we have $1 million, why not just spend it on more media buying? Why would we spend more on analytical solutions or analytical processes? How do you suggest organizations and again, change agents or champions that we have attending today think about answering those questions?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we've got value statements. I might have it on a screen around here somewhere with me. I think there's data that you can cite. I'm pretty sure the large consulting companies have done a fair bit of work that I think is statistically rigorous and backs up like why it's important. I'm just trying to think here. Right, this is it. I know Capgemini did a study that showed there's a direct relationship between digital maturity and financial performance. So in some of those studies, we're showing 9% uplift in top line revenues, up to 26-30% uplift in margin and in profitability, and then increasing valuations. So I think it's worth understanding the research that's happened externally. What we do within Google is that we often work with our customers to try and pull together a value calculator for the value of data to the organization. And so we try and break down and look at, well, what is the value of a CRM record? What is the value of understanding a visitor to your website, and try and calculate a value for that, and then work drive through that process. So we actually, I know this sounds like a blunt instrument. We actually often take the studies that McKinsey or BCG or Bain do, and then we'll work with the customers to try and personalize those so you can put in front of your CFO some type of real estimate based on the best assumptions you can make for what that means for your business. Now, here's a little secret for everyone, and there's some questions here. Kelsey's asked a question here that I'm interested in talking about. Sometimes the value is just engaging your organization in a conversation about the assumptions behind your business case. It doesn't matter if people agree or disagree on the assumptions. What you want is a strong, engaged conversation on what those assumptions are. So it's okay to put up a straw man. And for everyone out there thinking about how you navigate this conversation, one shouldn't be concerned with defending the dollar value in the business case. One should be concerned with making sure that you get agreement on a set of assumptions that do drive a business case, if that makes sense. So if you change the conversation, Michael, to be about, well, these are the assumptions that we've made based on this. How do we think these assumptions apply to our business? And get people to debate those, you'll find that debate is not as confrontational, because sometimes people just walk away from the numbers. They don't agree with the numbers. But if you can translate your initiatives into numbers, but root the conversation in the assumptions and get people to challenge the assumptions. And if they don't like your assumptions, that's fine. Get them to suggest an assumption that they think is more realistic. That is a great way to drive a value-based conversation to the value of analytics. And it's going to help bring out the naysayers and what people say when you're not in the room, because everyone knows that you're the person that's going to say that. So you want to sort of flesh out those assumptions. You can do that. That's a pathway to doing that.
And one of the things that we often noticed, even the change can happen in how you frame the conversation. A lot of times we come in and we share, this is our hypothesis. And our hypothesis is based on this observations and this set of data that we either have access to or was given to us. And based on our hypothesis, here's what we see can happen, positive outcome. Here's what we can see can be a negative outcome. And if negative outcome does happen, here's how we plan to mitigate it. Because having a mitigation plan in place can be quite transformative, because it allows those naysayers to see that you've thought that through as well.
That's right. And the thing I would add is, and when you engage with your colleagues on that, don't focus on the mitigation plan and the value. Focus on the set of assumptions and get everyone to beat up the assumptions. Because once people feel like they're part of the assumption process, they have to own whatever the outputs are of the interaction. So I think I've found that to be a really useful method to drive alignment and engagement. Because in large organizational life, you've got to bring people along with you. And I find that value-based conversation, you want to, at the end of the day, talk about the scoreboard, but it's that process of engagement that really wins people along. To Kelsey and Holly asking the questions here on the live stream, this is really difficult. And I talk to my account executives. They'll often say, I've got a great champion that I work with, but the champion doesn't have a change agent. And if you're a champion rather than a change agent, the first thing you've got to do is you've got to ask, seriously, you have to ask around the organization and find who has the clout and the influence and the desire and is connected enough to really drive change. And a lot of you will have experienced this, that your transformations only reach a certain level in the organization. And usually that's a sign of you've got a team of champions that are driving, but your success is going to cap out at a business unit level or a sub-brand level until you can find someone that spans across that. Now, if that's the situation, you don't want to sit around waiting all day for your organization to hire the visionary. I think the next thing that I see really successful, and I'm seeing this right now in Asia Pacific in one of our automotive customers, different industry, but the same organizational challenges. We've done a phenomenal CRM integration to site analytics that's really driving, new ways of operating for this automotive company. What we're doing now is we're packaging up that success story that just comes from one country that in and of itself, the organization typically would ignore because it's not a huge country, but the work is innovative enough that you can then position that to show if we could just replicate this in this business unit or this market, it's a pathway to success. So maybe that's a shout back to the carrot versus catastrophe reference. Find those little nuggets of success, and then how do you amplify a success story to do that? And then it's really interesting. This is it's becoming like Paul's opinion on organizational alignment. There's a great book called The Power Paradox. It's written by a guy from the University of California in Berkeley. His name is escaping me, but if someone can search right now, The Power Paradox, we can put it up on the on the live chat. It's really interesting, though, in terms of organizational life. When you do have a success story, sharing the credit with as many people outside of your direct organization as possible is also an incredibly powerful mechanism to then drive organizational enthusiasm and momentum to the change that you're trying to. So, and the reason why it's the power paradox is that paradoxically, you're giving away the credit, which in organizational life often is counterintuitive to how people operate. But when you do that, that's what provides momentum to the program, the analytics transformation program that you're driving. And I think things like that can become really powerful, Michael.
Thank you for that, Paul. And a lot of times, you've mentioned obviously a great example in Asia Pacific, but we tend to learn best by seeing examples and hearing success stories. In your opinion, what brands or maybe CPG enterprises you feel are doing a very good job with analytics? Can you share what some of the things you're seeing, your observations, lessons learned?
I'm always wary of naming names, but when it's a positive success story, like we work with some incredible global brands. I think there's people represented on some of these calls. Three that immediately come to mind, though, in the CPG space and health and personal care space would be L'Oreal, Nestle, and Estée. I think all of those companies in different parts of the world and in different regions are doing some really incredible things. And I think also it's been a long time coming. So let's look at L'Oreal, for example. When was it? JP Argand, the CEO of L'Oreal in 2010, I think was the year that he declared for L'Oreal the year of digital, 2010. So in 2010, it was the year of digital. I think in 2015 is when they hired a chief digital officer for the company. So that's another 5 years ago. So if you look at the organizational momentum, I did a lot of work 2 or 3 years ago with Frédéric Rosé, who's the CEO of L'Oreal Americas. And what was amazing is seeing the trickle-down effect of having a senior executive reorienting an organization to have digital at the heart of everything they do. And then that drives a whole bunch of different sort of growth strategies and thought processes, because now all of a sudden you're thinking about how do I think about the consumer, but how do I think about the consumer in a digital first world? And getting a beauty brand to think like that with that many people across that many countries, across the types of products that you use, like they're not digital products. Like a makeup is certainly not that type of, it's not a digital interaction, but all of a sudden now you've got digital experiences. They've thought about it to an extent now where they've actually made investments in augmented reality technology companies to help you look at the type of lipstick and how is that going to look on you before you buy it. So that's the type of, there's an example of a company that's started a long time ago, executive commitment, put in place specialized, centralized functions like a chief digital officer to help reinforce and drive the changes, and then is now getting to the point where they're thinking about the value exchange between a consumer and their brand to capture new data sources and information in different ways to then feed their analytics machine that then feeds that process. So just looking at that short little L'Oreal story as I'm thinking about it on the fly, you see how all those pieces come together. Now, some interesting observations there, like how many organizations have chief digital officers right now? And even looking at that L'Oreal story, they make an announcement in 2010. Why did it take 5 years? Why is there a 5-year gap between then and a chief digital officer? Clearly, that indicates to me that the organization realized that we weren't driving enough change without a specialized function on this, because the organization was still making progress, but not making enough progress. So when we want to make more progress, we put a specialist there. I experienced this at Google 8 or 9 years ago when I joined. At Google now, we don't have mobile specialists. But 8 years ago, we had a whole bunch of people who were mobile specialists. And that's because Google was making a transition from being desktop focused to being smartphone and mobile focused. And because that was a transition for the organization and it was new muscles, we had to put mobile specialists into place in our organizations in order to exercise that muscle for everyone else that didn't naturally have that muscle. And that's the interesting thing I'm seeing in CPGs right now. We're seeing a proliferation of chief digital officers in our organizational structures. And I think that's awesome, because that's an acknowledgement that if we're going to change the way that people interact, we need people who are all the time thinking about the consumer through the lens of digital, and then helping build that muscle amongst brand managers and others who maybe think about their category before they think about the consumer's experience through a digital lens. So I think that's an interesting observation. And then you can see as their maturity level grows, then that drives into different business decisions, acquiring different technologies, doing that. And I think I mentioned Nestle and Estee Lauder. In different ways, both those companies are doing similar transformations, similar investments in people, in process, and in the right partners to deliver new outcomes.
And one of the things before we take the question from the audience that I like you mentioned is, over the past 10, 15 years, 20 years, we've seen organizations saying there is a social media revolution, right? That was happening, still happening. We had mobile revolution. Everyone was saying, to your point, mobile revolution is coming. There is a digital transformation. I think in some cases we have to make the realization that it's really not just about digital transformation, it's digital evolution. And we as companies just have to become more adept at things are going to come in faster and faster, and those things are going to impact our business. And unless we build a muscle for how we're able to adapt, take advantage of those new technologies, new market trends, most likely we are not going to succeed in the long run.
I think you'd say it so well. Like I've used the word transformation like 25 times on this call. Sometimes transformations are incremental evolutionary steps.
Exactly.
I think that's really important. There's just two things quickly, because I know we're going to run out of time. There's two things that I want to just take away from your book, because I know that's a way that people can follow up on this. There's one word that I think is really, really important. I haven't said it yet, and that's governance. Another company that I think is doing great work in this space is Mondelez. Mondelez is a close partner of Google, and I think they've done some incredible things. And at Mondelez, there's a quote that runs around now, which is, if you don't have really good data governance, you really don't have anything. And I think that's something for all of us to think about. Like, what are the questions we're asking around data governance? There's a lot of changes happening with regards to the information exchange and the social contract, if you will, for how all of us as individuals interact with the digital world, and how that sort of that online and offline world, how that works and exchanges together. I think really taking the time to look at, to look at your data governance strategies, and understanding that you can't ensure any freshness or integrity of data without a strong approach to data governance, I think is really, really important. There's another just great takeaway I gleaned and from your book, Michael, and what you do a really great job of is you do a great job of combining frameworks that makes it easy for people to take senior executives on a change journey. And what I mean by that is you heavily reference in your book the Google research with Boston Consulting Group around what is your digital maturity? Where are you in this evolution? Are you nascent? Are you emerging? Are you connected? Or are you multi-moment? And all of you on this call, if you've been to a presentation or if you've been in a meeting with Google, you've heard these expressions, right? There's nothing new in this. Michael, what I love, what InfoTrust is bringing, is how you layer into each of those phases. What are you trying to achieve? What's your purpose? And do you have a vision that connects that purpose to the company? Then based on that vision, what are the platforms and technologies one needs to have in place? Based on those platforms and technologies, what are the processes that you need to implement within your organization to connect those platforms and that purpose to the people in your organization? And do you have the right people that can drive change within status quo? I think it's a really smooth flow. And then, finishing the P's, I do like how you're acknowledging the pace of change in organizations and how big organizations need to get decisions made, and then that drives a payoff. So I like how you've combined the nascent, emerging, connected, multi-moment framing, because any C-suite executive that I work with likes to know where they're at in that journey. But then you're giving a roadmap for exactly what are the elements you need to address in order to progress through that journey. And focusing on that and engaging with partners like yourself to do that, I think is going to equip everyone on this call with just renewed energy to drive and make these changes inside their organizations.
Thank you, Paul. That's absolutely what we were going after. Is BCG and Google have done an amazing job laying out what the stages are. We just wanted to give, if you will, a map and directions. Here's how we progress from one to another. One last question. It's end of the year is coming. It's budget season. It's priority season. It's looking ahead season. Any tips on how to secure a budget for next year? And what should we be thinking about spending our digital budgets on next year? What are the hottest items that you need to consider?
A clarifying question. You're talking about the types of budgets that move analytics projects, not media budgets, not spend budgets, right?
Yes, more on a digital analytics front.
First of all, there's two things. We had a recent roundtable with non-marketing cross-functional executives at Google. It was a virtual event. And one of the things that they were talking about, this is finance and chief operating officers, they were talking about one of the most profound changes that COVID has had on them from a budgeting standpoint, has been to realize they need to move away from maybe the 12-month longer term cycle budgeting cycles to more agile budgeting. So I would absolutely be looking to start that conversation in your group, in your organizations, with regards to how agile can we be? Can we look at funding these projects in different ways? Are we stuck on a 12-month budgeting cycle or not? And then if you can drive that sea change in executives with regards to more fluidity, with regards to how budget gets allocated, I think that would be how I would do it. Now, the other way is, the way I run my business, we've got an expression that the team with the best plan wins. So that's the other thing I'd say to you all is, if you know you want to do this, you all know when your financial year starts and then you start the process of working back from there. And if you've got the best plan that you can feed into that process, you've got a greater chance of unlocking the assistance that you need to be successful. And just like one final shout out, and this is not just for InfoTrust, but this is for all of the organizations out there that offer the types of capabilities that InfoTrust brings to the market. Inside one of my customers right now, I alluded to it earlier, there are 2 projects that are pretty much identical in scope and outcome. One of them secured budget and is working with a third party that is helping organize and provide like thrust and momentum. The other group decided, we've got this. We've got all the skill sets we need in our team, and we're gonna pull this off ourselves. And what's happening in that organization is the team that's trying to pull it off themselves is being weighed down by the status quo of all the regular business as usual things they need to do. And they're not successfully executing the outcome as well as their peers who are on another floor with a similar project, who are driving an outcome because they took a different approach inside their organization. And, you want to attach yourself in organizational life to those wins, because it's good for your career, it's good for your company, it's good for how you engage. And I think that's another thing to remember as well. Like, winning that planning process, winning that budgeting process sets you up for personal and career success and organizational success. So it's worth taking the time to think about that plan. And I know my teams at Google, when we're doing our job right, we should be helping you with content and ideas to equip you to win in that critical part of the process that typically we're not involved in. Like, that's the sale that you guys do in your daily job. So there's some ideas, Michael. Yet again, if there was a silver bullet, we would have already passed it out to everyone, and everyone would be well-resourced and not complaining about how things get done in their organizations. But that's some ideas for what it's worth.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. I know we can see Brad, which means our time is almost up, if not up already. I tremendously enjoyed our conversation. I'm confident that our attendees have as well. And throughout the day, please ask additional questions, and we'll provide a point of view from our experience in how some of these might be answered.
And thanks again to everyone, and thank you to my fellow speakers. There's some great speakers from some awesome organizations who are going to share some of their stories. They're great stories. So stick around and listen to what the other folks have to say.
Yes. And speaking of great speakers, thank you, Paul, Michael. Let's give a big virtual. It's not near as fun as in person, but thank you for the time. Couple key items. I just wrap this up that I love that you said, Paul, is number one, I need your advice on how, if there's 3 meetings within a meeting, I excel at the first and third meeting, which are now gone. So I need to have a separate one-on-one with you to figure that out. 2 is the three key rules as all of us try to transform, right? The change agent, the exec sponsor, and the day-to-day champion. And 3rd, you read our amazing book, and everybody should go buy it on Amazon. So thank you both. We're going to head into a 4 to 5 minute break max. We're going to come back with Estee Lauder. So super excited about the topic, consumer data governance. So feel free to stretch out, do some push-ups, go to the restroom. We'll see you in 4 to 5 minutes. Thank you, Paul and Michael.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. Hope everybody had a chance to go to the restroom, grab some more coffee. Thank you again for engaging. Again, Paul and Michael, it was a great session. We have many more sessions coming up. So let's get started. As someone who spends their days talking with organizations around the globe, I have to say this topic, consumer data governance, is one of the hottest topics that we hear, and every organization is talking about it, specifically in this industry. I'm really excited for this next session. Please help me virtually welcome Keisan Fimasan and Bridget McKeovian from Estee Lauder Companies. Keisan is a vice president of online athletics for our analytics for Estee Lauder Companies. She bridges marketing and technology teams to enable brands with the right data to be relevant to our consumers, to their consumers globally, anytime, anywhere, from any device. Leading global redesigns for Estee Lauder and MAC Cosmetics, and deploying over 100 plus sites and features in key markets, North America, China, Japan, and Germany. Her prior experience includes managing the portfolio of worldwide digital product design for Apple Retail in stores and product management at Sephora, leading data and store personalization apps. Please help me welcome Keisan. And Bridget is the Chief Privacy Officer at the Estee Lauder Company, responsible for the company's privacy compliance program and strategy. Bridget has over 10 years of experience operationalizing and advising on global privacy-related matters. Prior to joining the Estee Lauder Company, Bridget practiced law at 2 large national firms in Canada. She advised clients on a broad range of privacy, digital advertising, and consumer protection issues associated with the carrying on the business over the internet. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me give a big virtual welcome to Keisan and Bridget. Ladies, take it away.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. So as was mentioned, my name is Bridget McElveen, and I'm the Chief Privacy Officer at the Estee Lauder Companies. So Kason and I are here today, and we're going to speak on the topic of consumer data governance. But that is, as we've already heard so far today, a very large topic, and we only have 30 minutes. So we're going to focus specifically on consumer data governance as it relates to our websites and our tags and cookies that are placed on those sites. So Kason, I'll let you just introduce yourself quickly before moving on. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. My name is Kason. I wish I was VP of Athletics. I'm probably the least athletic person you will know. I'm much more of a product person. So I think Brad did a great job in introducing me, but just a few key things just for context for this conversation. So we actually run more than 300 sites around the world in more than 50 markets. And that is on one global platform. So this is important to note because it's a key to our being able to actually put in tag and cookie governance across so many sites so quickly and to be able to govern it so quickly. The other thing is that whole platform is completely homegrown. So, you know, we have our own data centers, we have our own databases, our own application servers, et cetera. So we have been able to tailor it completely to us. So.
Great. So I think as a starting point for any discussion on consumer data governance and how a company should approach the collection, use, and sharing of consumer data really starts with the values of the organization. We heard some of this in the previous session. And for the Estee Lauder companies, treating consumer data appropriately and in accordance with consumer preferences and regulatory requirements is really consistent with our core values. And those, the two in particular are respect of the individual and uncompromising ethics and integrity. So as we look at these values in the context of consumer data, they help us define how we should be using our consumer data, as opposed to often is how we can. What does the law say we can do? But the question, at least for the Estee Lauder companies, is a lot more broader. What should we do? And how does that work with the consumer in terms of what she's giving us and what she expects to receive in return? So overall, these values provide us with the foundation for our policies and overall approach to consumer data governance over cookies and tags, which we'll get into a little bit more deeper in the slides to come. So if you can go to the next slide, we'll just talk a little bit about why we're here and why we're here now. So on the left side of the slide, we can sort of talk about really what's happening in the legal landscape that sort of initiated some of this work. Over the last few years, we've seen the privacy landscape evolve in two main ways. So first, we've seen an increase in privacy legislation around the world, including in the US. And I'm sure as many of you on this call know, in the US, we have not historically had privacy laws with a broad application that would apply to the type of data that would typically be collected and processed in connection with cookies and tags. However, this changed over the course of the last year with the enactment of the California Consumer Privacy Act. And it's similar to many of the different privacy regimes we've seen around the world, and guidelines we've seen from regulators on these topics of cookies and digital ads in Europe and other jurisdictions. The second major change that we've seen in the landscape relates to what regulators are focusing on in terms of compliance. Many of you think of privacy and privacy issues being associated with a data breach or something that you'll see in the headline of the news. But really, we're starting to see regulators look at other areas of non-compliance, and that includes data misuse. So I think it's these two changes together that really make this a good time, at least from the legislative privacy landscape, to be looking into this area. Kason?
So I think, at least you probably have been thinking about, putting in some kind of governance for your tags and cookies on your sites. People talk about it all the time. For us, it was quite a daunting task because, as I said, we have more than 300 sites in over 50 countries. So it's a challenge even on one site. And I think it's important to tell you guys why we actually did it now. Obviously, Bridget talked a lot about the changing privacy landscape. I also think that the way that we think about data is really as a competitive advantage. So, we don't want to send out our data to all kinds of third parties, one, because the consumer may not know it on their end, but also because that data, essentially the actions that our consumers take on our sites, is actually a competitive advantage for us because it actually signals their intention and what they want from us on the site. So that's the first thing. We're protecting our consumer data, but also our competitive advantage, right? And our relationship with that consumer, really. The second piece is it really protects against security issues. So in the best of worlds, we obviously love and trust all of our partners, but we live in a world where essentially if you have a piece of JavaScript on your site, that is essentially a door. And that partner may do everything that they can, obviously, to make sure that they are secure. But essentially, if they are hacked or if they have a breach, that JavaScript is a doorway into your site and into your systems and fundamentally into your customer experience. The last piece that actually is sort of a surprise and delight for us is when we did actually the cleanup for this, we saw up to 20% improvement in mobile site speed. So, a lot of this came from actually removing any hard-coded tags on our sites, which was actually blocking content. But in a world where people are expecting things faster and more responsively than ever, we were pleasantly surprised because this was a huge side benefit to us. And again, improving the consumer experience for the better. So I think all these things are obvious, very daunting task for us because we had so many sites. I think the reason why we were successful really boils down to three things. The first one is people. So, I can say that I have been very, very fortunate in my partners in this. I think from a business privacy and security leadership perspective, we were all in, right? And we actually made time for this, and it wasn't just like, oh, someone else is going to take care of it. I think, we were lucky to be able to define the strategy. We owned the budget, but also at the end of the day, we also owned execution. So, you can put in policies, you can say whatever you want, you can post a tag policy, send it out to everyone in email, but it actually doesn't do anything unless you can actually operationalize it in execution. So, first the cleanup itself, which is hard, but also, ongoing, how do you make sure that people are invested and are accountable to this moving forward? The second thing, and I'll go into this a little bit more, but, we, in all of our complexity, and we are a very complex organization, probably like many of you, we are global, which means that we have many layers of sort of governance and stakeholders and decision rights. We were able to piggyback essentially on our working model that we have in place already, which is really from the global, regional, and local organizational levels and how we work with our brands. And I'll go into that in a little bit. The last thing is the technology. So it is always the last thing, to be honest. I think, Bridget actually got to cover really the harder, meatier things, which is what are our values? What do we stand for? What do we want to be, right, to the consumer? The technology just enables that. And there are two things that really made it come to life. One is, I mentioned we're on a global platform. So actually our code base is consistent all around the world. Obviously, we need to, localize and make sure things are relevant in the market. But because we have a core global technology stack, we were able to roll this out more quickly. So that on our side. But then I think on the InfoTrust side, and this is a little, kudos to the InfoTrust team. We use Tag Inspector. I think there are a lot of tools out there like it. just to be honest with you. But I think what really stood out from working with the InfoTrust team is they actually tailored it to our processes. So, there's the scanner, but like how those scanners are actually alerting people, the dashboards that we have to actually, maintain it and govern it, all of those things were really tailored to us. And without that flexibility of the technology to fit what our business purpose is, it actually never would have gotten off the ground. So I think that's really the last key piece as far as keys to our success. So if we want to move on to the next slide. So, hopefully, and, maybe you don't have more than 300 sites around the world, but essentially I think the steps are the same. The first thing that we had to do was, regroup with Bridget and security, create our policy, like look and audit our tags and see what was actually there and be like, what is actually the business reason? And is it balanced with essentially what the risks are, right? To the consumer, to security, all of those things. So we actually looked at those use cases in detail. We did an audit of every single site across, and this is outdated, it's 300 sites, across all of our sites. We looked at the locations of them. We looked at the data that was sending through them. At a high level, we don't send PII through our tags. We also just made sure that from a partner perspective, we actually had up-to-date risk assessments for them, right? So this was a big task in and of itself. Again, the technology helped because we were able to automate the audit of it, but it was really a lot of conversations, a lot of just really talking to each other really about what our expertise was, to make sure that we really understood what was going on to be able to draft a global tag policy. And, for us, that took 3 months, which I think is pretty good, actually. The second piece was actually the tag cleanup. So once we actually created a global tag policy, which, to be really concrete about what that means, it was literally one piece of it was a Word doc that actually outlined the definitions, the principles, the things that we agreed to at a high level, but also we have a living and breathing list of whitelisted and blacklisted tags that we allow on our sites globally and what data can actually be passed through them. So based on that, we came up with another list, which was tag violations by domain. So every single site, we had a list of essentially every single tag that should be removed, tweaked, changed, whatever happens to be. And, the team was great. They plowed through it and essentially got through it in 4 weeks, which is pretty astronomical. The reason why we're able to do that is because we did it in parallel across all our regions. The last piece, once you actually do the tag cleanup, is ongoing monitoring alerts, right? So, it's a lot of work. Like you can see, it was already 4 months in and, some of us were getting a little bit more tired than others, but essentially, what we had to do was put in place a process to do ongoing monitoring alerting. So this is where, again, Tag Inspector comes into play. But, once a month, we have a scan literally of every single site that we have. It goes against our global tag policy and it emails certain stakeholders saying, hey, you have some tags on these sites. We don't know what they are. You should take a look. And there's a process essentially to make decisions about which tags should keep on, which tags should be reviewed, so that, we literally have to never do a tag cleanup again because it was a lot of work. So really, that's the last piece, and that's the last piece that really needs to be put in place. Before I came on board, actually, we've done tag cleanups before, I think, 3 times before, and they just never stuck. And the reason why is because there wasn't an ongoing process to actually keep it up to date and living, right? And then you end up having the same conversations over and over again instead of having it just be part of business as usual. So next slide. I'll give you a little bit of insight into this. This is probably the most complicated piece, especially if you are a global company, a multinational company. Ownership and decision rights is really hard. Thankfully, because of the way that we're structured and because of the way that we work, we were able to piggyback essentially on the decision rights and ways of working that we already have. So, as I said, we have a global platform. So that platform, that technology, the tag policy itself, the best practices, the governance, that was really done at a global level. What we went to the regions with is really process. So, what is the process of actually keeping this up? What actually works for you? The facilitation actually with the site owners themselves, because every single site that we have is run as a little business. And so those are the people who run the site. Those are the people who know what should and shouldn't be on there. We in global are too far away from it. We would never understand that. So, the region really helps with that facilitation as well as prioritization of what needs to be addressed. And then we get down to the market, which is really closest to the consumer. So again, the way that we operate is that we really believe that the site owner or the people in the market are closest to the consumer. They are the ones who need to be responsible for the business. They're responsible for execution and operationalization. And, at the end of the day, they're the ones who make the call, right? What to do or what not to do. But, that is all supported essentially by our region and also global guidance, just so that we as a company obviously keep up our brand trust, have consistency in the way that we treat our consumers, and, also obviously make sure that we take on the least risk possible from a security perspective. So if you could go on to the next slide. Oh, Q&A already.
Great. So we can start with this one,
Yeah.
Kason. As you think back on your consumer data governance strategy, do you think you had the right stakeholders, anyone you would have included? So I'll start off with a few thoughts on that one. I think you mentioned that we really worked closely with privacy, security, legal, and the business. And I think having someone in your role, Kason, was really critical to the success of bringing all of these stakeholders together and to make this happen. So I do think that we had, the right stakeholders in the room, at least when it came to making decisions about the policy. But again, this is, as you've said, it's like a living and breathing document and process. So, there's always a lot of organizational change at Estee Lauder, people moving into different positions and different organizations occurring. So I think as this continues to evolve, we'll bring other people into the loop as we need to. Have any additional thoughts on that one?
We work in such a large organization. I think it's really a balance of finding the people who are committed and who understand and who have a depth of expertise, actually. And I think magically we were able to do that. So, So I feel very fortunate from that perspective. So no one else. I'm sure there'll be other people through time, but we were able to stand it up and make it operate, which is amazing. So second question, what are some of the biggest keys to success that you would like to share? So I actually would like to take this one first, and I'm sure, Bridget, you have some thoughts as well. I think the biggest thing is focusing on the why, and from many perspectives. So, I am very much about making sure that the consumer and the business benefit is front and center and very clear. And obviously from a change management point of view, I think that really helps. But, people change and we may be in different roles, we may move on. And, really the testament of whether something keeps on going and keeps on operating is if the business actually gets value from it. And, I think that was the one thing that I just wanted to make sure was front and center in all of this. It was the why, making sure that everyone really, really understood the payoff and understood, the consequences if we didn't keep it up. So Bridget, I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, I think that just communication is key and transparency is key. And we see this, I think, when we're doing various things on the sites that, having something like this pop up out of nowhere isn't always successful. So ensuring that, all of the different levels that you said, the global, the regional, and the market is aware and really why we're doing it and what the benefits are to them.
So I think this one is for you, Bridget.
Yeah, sure. So what is the largest struggle in regards to privacy with other countries? So I think one of the issues that a global company needs to deal with is the fact that there are all of these different privacy requirements in different areas of the world, and how you may need to pivot to adjust your practices to whatever those other requirements in other countries are. And I think that brings us back to the importance of aligning on the values piece and making this not necessarily about, well, what can we do, is to really come up with a policy that is, regardless of what the laws say, obviously comply with the laws, but where are we going to make our standard that everyone complies with, regardless of what the law may be in Indonesia or in India or in France. That it becomes very difficult to manage. But I think that if everybody gets behind like a global set of guiding principles with respect to how we're treating data, and then, the market slightly adjusts if they need to, that's the best way to sort of achieve success. And something like this, having a nuanced approach for our company that is country specific, I don't really think would be practical to implement.
I think another question for you, Bridget. There are a lot of privacy questions.
Yeah, so with respect to consent management for this is exactly, we came up with, and it's sort of separate than what we've discussed on this call, but for consent management as it relates to cookies and tags, we did not do a country by country approach. We said, we're going to have 3 different approaches to how we can implement consent. And, we sort of divided the countries into those 3 buckets, depending on what the laws were. So it did mean that some countries were taking a higher standard than may have been necessary. But again, as long as these are communicated to the countries, and the reasons why, it didn't become an issue in too many circumstances, maybe a few, but overall, we were able to come up with a streamlined approach to getting those consents.
So the next question is, and I might be breaking up, building on Paul's comments, who is your champion and where did they sit in your organization? I think we were all really good about just making sure that, we made time for it. I think a lot of it had to do with the existing ways of working, actually. As long as people understand why we needed to do something, I think the change management wasn't really that difficult. I think, as long as you go back to the why, I didn't feel actually that there needed to be a lot of championing, to be honest with you. Maybe, actually, I just thought of something. Probably our czar of site speed was strangely the biggest proponent of this that I did not expect. And that's because of the hidden sort of benefit of this, which is it increased our site speed across the board.
Great. So just to sort of close up the conversation today, is we have just a few takeaways. The first one being is that, cookie and tag governance is a skincare routine. You can do the deep cleanse once, but it will be you'll get more benefit from having the regular governance process in place. So Kason likes her comparison to the beauty regime. I love that. So and really that's the only way to do it in a compliant way. You can't do a deep cleanse once every 5 years. You're not going to have the success. And I think Kason alluded to the fact that we've done that before and nothing ever stuck. So you really do need a process to make this continual. The second is making sure that you define your decision rights. You have the right people in the room setting the policy, and then the right people implementing.
And then really the last two, which I think we've talked about already, we've just been really lucky. I think we have a really great collaborative relationship where we have a mutual respect of, essentially our expertise, like very, very deep expertise in each one of these pillars, and really, a shared goal to make sure that there's excellence in execution, and very much aligned around the principles and values, as Bridget had said, and really what our outcome was at the end of the day. The last thing obviously is technology, but I think the key thing about technology is just making sure that it fits the purpose, and that purpose has to be defined by the business and the organization. And I think the other thing is, complexity does not scale. So we live in a very complex organization, and really the only way things can scale is if they're kept really, really simple and to a certain extent flexible, right? I think Bridget talked about, the reason why we didn't create rules for every single market is, one, it's not sustainable because it's too complex. And so it's really driven by, things that encapsulate what our principles are, and then allow people to actually, operate those things on their own, have decision rights where it makes sense, and, be part of the process, right? I don't think anything that we set up was didactic, really, by any means. I think it was very much governed by principles and values that people could get behind. So.
Kason, Bridget, thank you so much. First, I have to apologize to Kason, but I do think VP of Athletics has a nice ring. No, but
I wish.
Just two takeaways that I love the skincare routine, right? You have to do it you need a process in place to manage this. I also love that you gave the whole audience a sneak peek into how you're set up from a governance process. So thank you for sharing that. I think it's helpful for organizations that may not be as far as long. And you mentioned this case at the beginning, but you mentioned the 20% improvement of site speed, which I know everybody on this call is thinking about site speed and how to make that e-commerce transaction much faster. So it's not just about governance and the ROI of that. It's about what are the other side benefits that you can get from this.
Yeah, and really at the end of the day, it's all for the consumer. All of the benefits are for the consumer. So.
Yes. So thank you for the quick, informative, engaging session. I'm sure like me, I'm sure everybody's thinking, can we just extend this session for another 3 to 4 hours so we can leave with a great governance strategy for our company? But again, truly insightful. Thank you so much. Hopefully you can stay on for the rest of the day, and let's give a big virtual applause to Estee Lauder. So,
thank you.
Thank you for having us. Happy to share.
Of course. We're now going to head into our next break. Let's be back at 1:45 Eastern Standard Time sharp. We're going to bring Chris Vaughn back on stage. He's going to join Nestle and Nestle Health Science for a session titled Using Insights to Maximize Media Performance and Personalization. So thank you all. Make sure you stretch, go to the restroom, get some more coffee, and we'll see you soon. Welcome back, everyone. I just had perfect timing during the break. My kids were screaming upstairs. So this is all working out today. Again, thank you for everybody for staying engaged. Hopefully you got in some exercises, moved around a little bit. We have an awesome session coming up. So to keep us on track, let me reintroduce Chris Vaughn, who's our head of CPG and multi-brand analytics. He's going to be joining Nestle and Nestle Health Science on a topic around using insights to maximize media performance and personalization. So with that, I'm going to step back. Chris, you can take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. Welcome back, everyone. Hope everyone got a chance to fire off a few quick high-impact emails during that break. Our next session is a Q&A session, and it's one that I'm super excited about. I've gotten to know both of our panelists, Chris and Arif, very well, working together with them over the last few years. And so I've gotten really a front row seat at watching them advance the digital maturity of not only their own teams, but also the Nestle organization as a whole. Both Chris and Arif are incredibly data-driven, although they utilize digital data in very different ways, given the unique KPIs of their individual roles. As a result, I feel like the stories and successes that they've had are awesome reminders of just how powerful data can be anytime you feel like you're just collecting data for data's sake. So with that, let me pass it over to them for some quick introductions. Brad, if you want to move, there you go. So Chris, let's start with you.
Wonderful. Hi, Chris. So good to be here with you today. So yeah, my name is Chris Jones. I'm the personalization at scale lead for Nestle USA. I've been in the CPG industry for about 15 years now, working across General Mills, P&G, CoverGirl, and now, of course, Nestle. And so again, at Nestle, it's been a great journey as well. So I've done a little bit of e-business or e-commerce acceleration, search discovery and holistic search strategy, and of course now personalization at scale.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. And let's also bring in Arif now. And Arif, welcome.
Thank you, Chris.
About your background.
Hi, thank you. First of all, it's a privilege to share this virtual stage with both of you and to speak to you all. My name is Arif. I have the privilege of leading the digital department at Nestle Health Science. Nestle Health Science is a very high growth part of Nestle that has both the CPG and the pharma components. It's a lot of fun to try to advance digital on both sides, where actually the two realities are very different. In my role, I oversee everything related to digital, thinking of media, content, data analytics, which is actually how I started in Nestle Health Science in the US, CRM, website, direct-to-consumer e-commerce, and I'm sure I'm missing something as well. I have been in Nestle for 9 years. I did the majority of my career actually in Switzerland, where I held a variety of roles in marketing, in finance even, and ultimately I ended up in digital that propelled me to the role that I'm today. And I'm happy to be here, and I look forward for this discussion.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, both of you, for the backgrounds. Let's jump right in. So you both just obviously told us about yourselves, your individual abilities within the Nestle organization. But let's talk a little bit about the impact that digital data has had and continues to have on your roles. So Chris, let's start with you. Can you talk a bit about the role that quality digital data plays in your day-to-day initiatives, personalizing consumer experiences there for Nestle USA?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, quality data is absolutely fundamental to what I do on a day-to-day basis. And if you really think about it, I would say that data quality is one of those critical building blocks to personalization, right? And it's really key to really understanding more about who our consumers are, what their interests are, what their needs are, preferences, and how and why they engage with our brands coming to our websites. And so we really like to digest that information just so that we can ultimately understand more about them and also understand more about what they value. And I'll come back to that point of value in just a minute, but I want to talk about the flip side of quality, because I think when you talk about if you don't have quality data, it's basically, having trash in, trash out. And I think there's a heavy risk there if you're really just collecting data and it's really, again, doesn't have that level of granularity or that quality and that meaning to it, because then what you then bring back to the consumer and how you activate it is not really meeting their needs. So going back to what I was saying about value, though, and why that's really important is for really kind of two main reasons, right? we really want to make sure that we're delivering meaningful consumer experiences on our websites, ranging from powering UX optimizations to also delivering content that really lays the foundation for enhanced future personalization functionality. And then also, we really want to understand that value in order to stand up more meaningful consumer value exchange. And that meaningful consumer value exchange is what allows us to also go back to that consumer, ask them more information about them so that we can kind of build out more of that profile so that we can, again, further our personalization efforts to them. One other thing that I'll mention is that it's focusing on data quality also helps, guide our analytics and our MarTech strategy and roadmap. So when I'm thinking about how do I learn or expand my, I would say, golden consumer profile of the consumer, I really do want to think strategically about that. And so quarter after quarter or month after month, I'm really thinking strategically about what are those integrations that are going to allow me to get to know that consumer deeper with different data collection or analytics capabilities. And again, that really allows me to translate that understanding into enriched consumer engagement, which is really what it's all about.
Awesome. I love the comment you made about consumer value exchange. I know that, not just with your team at Nestle, but also, globally with many CPG organizations, the rise in things like GDPR, CCPA, and kind of the limitation on how data is collected has only increased the importance of collecting and creating these holistic profiles of who your consumer is. So I think that's a very powerful thing that definitely should resonate with a lot of the attendees here today. RF, same general question for you, maybe a little bit different, just talking about the impact of digital data on your role, but more so in, since you work more with media, how do you use data to kind of develop those really powerful audiences and then also optimize your media campaigns?
Thanks, Chris. I guess the main question is, can you today do audience building and media optimization without data? I mean, you can't. It's become simply impossible to do. Even when we look at things like website, there's not specifically on paid media, but definitely on your own media, you just simply cannot anymore enter the discussions of what you want to do website without having a view of the analytics. It's not possible. So now that data has become table stakes, it's not anymore about whether you do it or not. It's about how you do it and why. One of the key learnings that we got was that knowing your why, knowing why you use data is absolutely critical. Today, I could talk about how we lowered our CPMs across the board through using data, how we improved the storytelling and conversion of our websites because of the insights we got. But none of that would have happened if we had not had employed some important critical thinking to the data before even looking at it. Because the choice of the data you look and how you interpret is absolutely critical to afterwards building those audiences and definitely optimizing a variety of media campaigns, being owned media or paid media. So the why is absolutely critical. If you don't know the why, and many times when you make decisions based on how much data you get versus the quality of that data or the quality or the context of that data in respect to your own business context and your own business goals, that's key. And a lot of people make that mistake. Then the how, everything related to tagging harmonization, everything related to setting up the right infrastructure from a technology point of view to capture the data so it becomes visible to you, and even from a visual perspective, that it just visually comes to you in a way that actions become immediate. That whole thing plays a huge role. So to build on what Chris was saying, it's definitely about the quality of the data, but it's also the quality of your thinking about the data and the quality of the processes, technologies, and talent as well that you employ to make the data come to life. Only with those things that, sure, you can then have the data and at your disposal in a way that actions become very clear, and then you can make all those optimizations. In the end, data shapes the dialogue that results in the decisions that ultimately deliver those campaign optimizations and audience building that you were talking about. So it's a huge.
I love it. You make a lot of great points there. One thing that I do want to call out is the pieces that you were talking about, the purpose, the why of analytics, the platforms that you're using, the people that you have on your team. All of those are elements that Paul Limbury talked about an hour ago, they're also all elements that are included in the book that everyone's getting for free. So I make sure to check that piece out, because that is definitely, we at InfoTrust believe the same thing, right? The people, the processes, the platforms, the purpose, those things are critical to defining and utilizing digital data to its fullest extent. Mm-hmm. So Brad, if you could switch to the next slide here. All right, awesome. So now that we know a little bit about both of you and why data is so valuable in your roles, I think everyone in attendance would really love to hear from both of you some awesome success stories that you've had. So let's start off this time with you. Tell us about some cool wins that you've had utilizing data in your role.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of cool wins to using the data, we've had plenty. We also had some cool wins to get us in the situation that we could use the data, and those are honestly the ones that were the more fun. But in terms of those wins that came from using the data, I'll come with 2 examples. One of them was, in the past, when I arrived, we used to do media retargeting. We used to do media retargeting based on website visits. And most people coming to our websites, they're coming to brands that have multiple products. But even if they arrive at a specific product, they are retargeted with a very generic branded type of ad creative. What we did was to use the data that we captured, use the insight that this person is interested in this product and not just interested in this brand, through tagging, right? So we tagged specifically all the pages, and using those tags, then instead of driving brand generic retargeting or creatives, we use more product specific. So if you visit the product page A, you get retargeted with a creative that alludes to that product A. And just by doing that, which was a very, very small effort type of tactic, we doubled our click-through rates overnight. And this was not even with my arrival, to be honest. We still spent quite a number of months doing that brand generic retargeting. Was through doing exactly what I said before, like setting the vision on why, bringing the talent, because this was not even my own doing. It was a member of my team. And when you did this, we saw click-through rates going double. So this was a huge win just by doing more personalized creative powered by that data, because without the data, we don't even know that this person was interested in product A, B, or C. Another good example was implementing best-in-class tagging in our websites. And Chris, you were involved when I arrived and when we started to have these conversations. Our tagging was nowhere. We had very cumbersome GA implementation. We just simply sometimes even have any events tag or anything. When we implemented this tagging and when we started to observe the conversions and the events that were happening on the website through data layers and much more qualified insights we could get from GA, we started to learn a lot more. Learn a lot more about the struggles that people were having, for example, to registering. Because oftentimes in our business, in our pharma business, it's not about buying, it's about registering to something that will create the atmosphere for them to then ultimately buy or be prescribed to a product. So registrations were key. When we learned these insights through this renovated tagging, and they become so apparent to what we had to do to improve that experience, voila, it's very easy to then adjust the UX, adjust the messaging on the website in order to get more registrations. And that's what we did. But ultimately, that visibility only came by having that best-in-class tagging that you and I, Chris, we built together. So I'm happy to share that win with you because you played such a key role in it. There were other cool wins that were not really related to what we got from using data, but what we did to get us in the situation that we could use that data. Creating a vision, hiring talent, getting great partners like InfoTrust and Google, aligning on what are the steps that we need to do to get to the place that we could even receive data. All those don't feel really as wins that come as a result of using data, but they are wins from a lot of hard work and a lot of discussions and battles that happen many times internally and sometimes CPG companies that tend to have that more than others, that ultimately result into these other cool wins that I talked before, that now are very, very nice, that are more obviously business related through this, improved CTRs and improved storytelling. But those are the ones that I would highlight.
Awesome. Thanks for obviously your transparency, your candidness there, and happy to obviously share in that win with you as well. So Chris, over to you for some big wins on your side.
Yeah, actually, I have a lot of similarities to what Arif just mentioned, but I would say, as I'm really focused on our websites right now and enhancing that, it's really been about standing up standardized analytics and standing up amplified marketing technologies, really so that we can enhance really what we're learning from our consumers that visit our websites on a more scaled basis. So right now across Nestle USA, we've got about 30 different brands. And prior to or earlier stages in earlier years, all of those brands had individual brand websites, individual marketing tech stacks, individual or unique tagging, everything else, all of that was very individualized, as I keep mentioning. And so it really made it difficult for us to aggregate that data, really to make meaning out of that so that we could, again, deliver more personalized, more engaging experiences to our consumers. So, what I say to that is now that we've standardized that across those 30 websites, if you think about it, across those 30 websites, we're getting millions of visits a year. And now that we have that more granular tagging, so that's really allowing us to translate mountains of data points, as I mentioned, into enhancements that really have helped us do things like, or I'll talk about the enhancements. Let me go there. I apologize. But things like full consumer account registration on our sites, that's one really big step. Because we know that we really can't rely on third-party data anymore to help us understand exactly who our consumers are. It's a competitive advantage, as our previous counterparts from L'Oreal were talking about, to really understand, for us to own that data, to understand who that consumer is. Another thing, going back to that, robust Google Analytics tagging and tracking, and I want to shout out you, Chris, and also Corey Chapman for helping us do that, which has been really awesome, is really standing up and listing out strategically what are those high value activities that we really need to understand at a more granular level. Similar to what Arif was mentioning, I think prior to us kind of going through this big scrub process of all of our tagging, we were all over the place. Some brands had where to buy tracked in one way versus another. Some brands had ratings and reviews tagged, but not tagged at all. Some brands were tagging, a product view at an aggregate product listing page versus at a granular product detail page. And now that we've been able to clean that up, what that does is allows us to look across all of those 30 websites and digest that information so that we can truly understand things like Arif was saying again, the most common consumer journeys that lead to things like conversion, or even what are those key friction points that might be preventing a consumer from signing up for email, which again, we talked about why that's important. So as we then look at other kind of initiatives or other big wins, I would say it's also pixel tracking. And I would say pixel tracking even more specifically to our where to buy tool. Because now what that allows us to do is even look at activities that are happening offsite. So digital campaigns, media campaigns, and tie that to activities that potentially drive that conversion all the way down to our website. So we have, again, that greater visibility, and we're starting to unlock things like understanding ROI, which has always been, I think, a critical gap across the CPG industry for a lot of us, particularly in grocery, where we don't own that last mile and we can't really see what's happening once the consumer kind of goes in store. So we're starting to close that gap, and I think that's huge. That's huge.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, and I'll wrap that up really quickly. So a few other things. I mean, I think, again, this allows us to advance our audience segmentation. So I don't particularly touch media, but as Arif was saying, and I'll complement that, all of that data that we bring into our website and now we collect and we can aggregate and understand, I can push over to my media counterparts and my peer so that she can create more advanced audience segments. And of course, this goes into different display campaigns, social campaigns, whatever that may be. And I think we all know, and it's very clear, that that drives increased ROI. So that's a huge win as well. And I think also that advanced segmentation also goes over to my peer that runs CRM. And so where Arif was mentioning this too, where before we were potentially sending generic emails and let's say to our Coffee Mate consumers, we know that that's not necessarily what they want. There are certain consumers that are really loyal to Natural Bliss, which is more of the plant-based or natural SKU. And so we really want to make sure that we were able to personalize those messages, And so that's what we've been able to unlock again by standing up more of that standardized analytics, standardized tagging, standardized MarTech across the board.
Sorry, I had to find the unmute button there.
No worries.
No, that's what I was gonna mention there a second ago. First of all, thanks again for the transparency there and all that awesome information. The thing I was gonna mention was you talked about that last mile and not having the final visibility over the purchase point, right? That's something that I know from talking with pretty much all of our global CPG partners that they have issues with. And it's something we're going to talk about a little bit later today in the attribution section as well. So for full visibility, we've gotten a ton of feedback leading up to this conference about individuals and organizations that have that exact same issue. So it's definitely a problem, a challenge, if you will, in CPG and something that, any way that you can find to combat that, and we'll have some suggestions on that a little bit later, but it is obviously very beneficial. So thank you for that. Next topic here is, and I just got a 10-minute warning, so so in terms of, Chris, obviously for you with your role, you and your team are knocking it out of the park from a personalization standpoint. You mentioned your teammates, your colleagues in media and CRM. Even though you've advanced the strategy within the organization and are having some huge wins, I'm sure there's been some big surprises for you as well. So is there anything that comes to mind just in terms of surprises and things that maybe you weren't expecting and you had to navigate to be successful?
Yeah, I think I would just echo a lot of what Paul said this morning or earlier this afternoon. I think the biggest surprise is really the level of effort that it takes to, really break down these data silos across functions, to standardize kind of these taxonomies, to standardize the KPIs across these functions so that you can really harness the data and make more amplified use of it. I think we all agree, right, that moving up the personalization maturity curve isn't easy. I think that's why we're all here today, so that we can learn from each other and really understand kind of what are those best practices or that roadmap to do so. And so I think for us, it was really, thinking about how do we start with bringing these cross-functional analytics partners together so that we can understand what data do we even have, right? And I think in an organization as big as Nestle, although Arif and I, we both clearly work at the same company, we work in different opcos. So even there, you can see that there's a lot of data in different pockets of the organization that we could really harness together. But I think you really have to start with your own individual team. And even that takes a lot of heavy lifting in order to really kind of uncover what is that data and to scrub it to make sure that it makes sense and that it can marry up to each other. I think another thing about that is really cleaning that data and putting it in a place, so whether that's a data lake or some other type of repository, so that you can democratize it. I think where organizations really start to unlock that value is when they don't just hold that data for themselves in a specific function, but they ensure that it can be utilized by other functions. So imagine, our CRM data being able to be leveraged by our sales team, being able to bring that to a potential retail partner and say, hey, did you know, this number of your consumers are really already engaging with this brand in this way? How do we kind of partner with each other in order to unlock greater value there to create a more but a more engaging consumer journey from the brand all the way through to the retail channel. So again, I think that's a big win and something that was kind of surprising and a lot of effort to try to, get over those hurdles. The other thing I'll say too, that's a bit of a challenge is making sure that you obtain the right resources. And I mean that both from a people resources perspective, but also from a platforms and applications perspective. in order to, again, make sure that you're able to democratize that data and to leverage it in a meaningful way. So just, again, a lot of the comments that Paul had mentioned this morning.
Awesome. To be honest, we're going to run out of time, I think, before we can get to all the questions that I really wanted to ask. But I want to really hone in, Brad, if you could skip a few more slides in here. One more. This one right here. So as we've mentioned a couple times throughout the day, we want to make sure that we're leaving everyone that's in attendance today with some really actionable next steps and quick wins that they can take back to their organization to start making better use of data and how they utilize it across their teams. So Arif, let me toss it to you first. What's one quick win that our attendees can take home today from you in order to start collecting better data and building better audiences?
The one that I would say is definitely to review and possibly redo your website tagging strategy. There's no channel across the entire digital spectrum can give you more insights than your own website. And if you have obviously a sizable traffic coming in, that's going to be even more powerful in terms of the insights that you can collect that ultimately will shape your decision making to everything, including obviously the audiences you create and the campaigns that you run and how you optimize them. So having that foundational tagging strategy set up the right way, and again, setting up the right way does not mean only from a technical perspective, and that obviously comes with having the right partners, the right talent and all that, but also from a business/strategic sense. Having a strong understanding of your business, having a strong understanding of what your business is looking for. What are the key questions that are part of your learning agenda that will define ultimately the decisions you're going to make. So try to first review to learn, right? What is your tracking strategy today? But try to build the next one, and potentially that can come with redoing based on a very strong understanding of your business and the strategy of your business, but also the technical, a flawless technical implementation. That's the one that I would say.
Yeah, and on that note, you mentioned nothing can be as powerful as your own website in terms of the data you collect. People focus, I know, a lot really strongly on lookalike audiences and things like that. But at the end of the day, the best data you have from an audience perspective is data about what has already actually taken place on your digital assets, right? So I think that's a great point and definitely a good win for people to take home today. Chris, same question to you from your perspective, a quick win that everyone can take home today.
Yeah, I would say the piggybacking a little bit off of Arif there, but taking it a step further is developing a strategic roadmap to really unify the data that's coming in through your website. So whether that is starting with the tagging strategy, could be also the pixel tracking, and it could be other different marketing technology integrations. Really thinking about how are you going to centralize that data into whatever that repository is, append it to a consumer identity so that then you can start to build your roadmap on personalization, both on-site and off-site, especially at this time when we know, consumers are really but have so many more digital devices that they are interacting with. And so the faster that you can do that and the faster that you can start building that roadmap, the faster you can really start delighting consumers in order to kind of advance your business initiatives and objectives.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for all of your candid answers, your transparency, and sharing some of your success stories and experience with us. Brad, can you hit the next slide real quick, please? Awesome. Yeah. So for everyone in attendance, if you would like to connect or network with Chris or Arif, please reach out to them on LinkedIn. They've been gracious enough to allow me to post their LinkedIn information here for you. Obviously, thanks again, Chris and Arif, for all your time, but also being so data driven and kind of beacons of light in the analytics industry. So at this point, everyone, we're right at time for the end of this session. So let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break and return at 2:20 Eastern, so 5 minutes from now, and then we'll be talking about App Plus Web. So exciting stuff there. Thanks again, Chris and Arif, and we'll see everyone in just a few minutes.
Welcome back, everyone. Before we get started on the next session, I have a quick question. I was actually trying to get some 90s rap in our intermissions and our breaks. Would love to hear in the comments if you would prefer 90s rap over the music we've been playing. It's a little bit of an internal conversation that we're having, but appreciate your feedback. Anyways, next on the session, I'm thrilled to bring my friend and business partner, Lori Kaiser at Google, to the stage to give us a sneak peek on App Plus Web. Lori is a senior Google Marketing Platform Partner Manager based in San Francisco. She's been a leader at Google for almost 7 years and came from a SaaS-based attribution startup that launched Attribution 360 within GA360 Suite a few years ago. She's been working with partners like InfoTrust for the past 3 years, highly focused on the analytics and measurement side of the business. Her role is to manage and grow Google's partner ecosystem through a partner-first approach for speed and scale. Lori thought my emceeing was so good today. This is my first performance that she's like, you know what? Come on in my discussion. I need some more emceeing as a part of this. So Lori, thank you. I will kick it over to you to kick us off.
Thank you, Brad, for the great introduction, as always. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I'm really excited to be with you here today to speak to you all about analytics, your favorite topic. If you want to get the latest updates on the future of Google Analytics, you can refer to our official analytics blog post. And I think we can post it in the comments so everyone can get that. Thank you. Great. So let me start by introducing the future of Google Analytics. The agenda today will be an analytics product overview. I'll talk a little bit about the new features to enable more value, and then I'll hand it back over to Brad, who will talk to you about getting started with App Plus Web properties. So let's get into an analytics product overview. With this in mind, let's dig into the capabilities of App Plus Web properties. All right, so App Plus Web is scalable with your business. App Plus Web properties can measure all the interactions people have with your brand online. It gives you a complete, relevant, and timely understanding of the customer journey. Reporting is always unsampled, and the analysis will sample specific events if a particular query returns more than 10 million events. So, sessions are an artificial definition of a visit that analytics uses to perform certain calculations. And then by moving to an events-based collection, analytics is able to perform more custom calculations faster. And by doing this will unlock more ways for clients such as yourselves to report on and manipulate your own data without worrying about any sampling. This also unlocks more capabilities and techniques in analysis. So let's talk a little bit more about App Plus Web. It is responsible, it's durable, and the measurement features. So there was a recent blog post, if you now are regularly following the blog, which I do recommend, that was posted in July called Take Control of How Your Data is Used in Google Analytics. It is continuously investing in capabilities to ensure businesses can access durable, privacy-centric, and easy-to-use analytics that work with and without cookies or identifiers. So stay tuned for more in the coming months. App Plus Web enables you to adapt in a changing environment. So the properties offer responsible, durable measurement that will drive business outcomes for the long term, while meeting user expectations for privacy. It was built with privacy in mind. Google Analytics currently has a number of compliance and data management tools available. However, these have evolved over time with the changing landscape. App Plus Web properties will be built with ways to safeguard clients' data from the very beginning. App Plus Web also provides intelligent business predictions. The properties automate and facilitate insight discovery, making it frictionless to get the most value from your data. So some of those features include predictive audiences and metrics, automated and custom insights, natural language insights, and automated event measurement. And App Plus Web drives business impact. And I know you all care about that. So the properties do allow you to more effectively activate your data and insights to drive measurable marketing outcomes. And some of those features include ads and GMP integrations, plus BigQuery export for all, YouTube engaged view through conversions, which is brand new, and of course, data-driven attribution. All right, let's dive into new features that enable more value. So I'll talk to you about just a few of the features today. And the most exciting part of App Plus Web Properties is that we're able to unlock new features and functionality that were available in analytics. So we'll dive into a couple of those that are particularly interesting for your business model. The first, measuring the user journey across both App Plus Web Properties. And when I refer to App Plus Web, I don't mean that you have to have both App Plus Web Properties. You can have either or you can have both. So users often switch devices or profiles as they interact with your brand, including across apps and websites. Analytics enables clients to see data across devices and across all reports. This was previously not available in Google Analytics. Clients can also give users better cross-platform experience with deep linking. So let's talk about how App Plus Web can generate better audience lists based on your logged in users. Having a good audience strategy is a competitive advantage for marketers, and Google Analytics enables clients. Historically, these audience lists were created based on anonymous identifiers, even if you had a logged in user. Now marketers can make even more of their own data and create audiences based on logged in users by leveraging the user ID in analytics. You can use this capability for powerful cross-platform use cases, such as engaging uniquely with users who have yet to purchase on your app, but who have already purchased on your website. And one of my favorite new features is better user engagement on YouTube. So this launched in actually just in August with additional roadmap items to come. So we recommend, we recommend using this feature with advertisers until additional pieces arrive to make it more meaningful and useful for advertisers. So specifically when modeling cross-device and DDA, which will come online in 2021, we'll see more metrics and analytics that align much more closely with Google Ads, and that will promote more usage. So stay tuned for those additional features coming out next year. All right, let's talk about how to improve your ROAS by using analytics conversions across media. So marketers have historically been able to measure conversions across ads, search ads 360, and display and video 360, but could only export analytics conversions to ads and search ads 360. So we're launching the ability to export conversions to display and video 360, as well to better inform your bidding strategies. And then also very important, enterprise clients receive SLAs and higher limits. So many clients require additional capabilities and guarantees to feel comfortable using analytics as their source of truth. Note that clients will not be charged for traffic measured in App Plus Web Properties to enable implementation. The core tenets of our enterprise strategy in App Plus Web Properties are a higher performance, so real-time BigQuery export, increased analysis throughput for ad hoc analysis queries, which means you can query hundreds of millions of events per query, and then higher product limits, so significantly higher limits versus App Plus Web Properties for many configurations such as audiences, properties, custom tables, and more. Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Brad to talk a little bit more about how you can get started with App Plus Web Properties today.
Thanks, Lori. I know this is a smaller segment. This is a very deep topic. I mean, at InfoTrust, as a leader in analytics and working with organizations that are on the call and just in this specific industry, this is a conversation that we've been having over a year now, starting to prepare about, as you mentioned, that future of analytics. Are you able to share, just from folks that maybe are a little bit new to this or they've just heard about this, just a very high level kind of timeline of how things are looking? Is that shareable at this point? I think that would be helpful for the group.
Yeah, so currently we're in beta with @+Web Free. And I would, again, stay tuned to the blog post in the next few weeks for updates. We will be coming out of beta soon, and @+Web Free will be available externally. And then also stay tuned in 2021, later in the year, we'll have some additional updates as well as the @+Web Properties Enterprise version rolls out into beta and general availability.
Awesome. Thanks, Lori. She's used to me asking timelines and trying to get the sneak peek for all of us on the summit today. So thank you. Before I jump into just kind of how to get started with @+Web, I just want to kind of go back to our initial conversation with Paul and Michael in our fireside keynote. And I think this is a perfect example for all of us in CPG and multi-brand to really start thinking about Google, being the leader in the analytics space, is launching an entire new future of analytics, right? A new way to collect data, a new way to reach your customers. And ultimately, that's being done to better serve your consumers or customers. So as we think about platforms and people and processes and some of the 6 Ps of digital analytics that was referenced earlier today, now's the time. If you have not started thinking about this, what this looks like in your organization, now's the time to do so. We've been talking with our partners for a very long time of preparing for this, but start to be having the conversation, start to understand what this looks like for your unique business and organization, and start to make sure that leadership, back to those, the change holders and executive sponsor and the day-to-day, like make sure those are the folks that are starting to push this. So this is why we need to run this alongside. So with that, getting started today, right? It'd be easy to be like, hey, just contact InfoTrust, we'll help you. But I wanted to share a little bit more insight in, this is the future of analytics. There's some very compelling new use cases that Lori mentioned that we went very surface level on. But at the start, we recommend getting started now. Don't wait. Get started on @+Web properties today. This means setting up a new set of properties and updating your analytics tags to start collecting data in this new data model that Google is launching. So you should keep your existing analytics implementation. We're not saying right now, go rip everything out and adjust it. This isn't this should not be perceived as a scary thing. This is an opportunity to get more data for your organization. But continue to use your existing analytics implementation, but then add this alongside as another source of truth as we get up running. So adding this new implementation, it's going to enable you to collect that history of data going forward and also take advantage of the new features and functionality that Lori just walked us through. So there's going to be more features released. Obviously, we're going to make sure from a content standpoint, from a leading partner in the space, we're going to be sharing this out with our partners, potential partners. But just make sure you're looking into it and take the time, put it on your list next week, the next couple of weeks, to start to really dig into what does your timeline look like. And finally, how to get up and running. This is a very simplistic, again, we can't go in depth what this looks like. But in order to help set expect, like these are the steps of @+Web at a very high level. Make sure you're taking this action internally. Again, there's a lot to learn in this space. You have partners like InfoTrust that can help guide this. And we'd be happy to answer specific questions, go in more details. We have teams, we have a whole task force that's been working on @+Web, understanding it and understanding what's best for the customers. So this session was not to, hey, let's scare everybody with this new version if you have not heard of it. The session was to really start thinking about this now, because this is only going to improve the way you do marketing to better reach your customers online. So I have to say, Lori, thank you so much for being able to join this session. Give us a sneak peek into @+Web, a little bit of a playbook of how organizations can get started today, and what we all believe is going to be a game-changing analytics platform that provides flexibility, but also more analysis for our partners across the globe. So thank you very much. Much appreciated. Appreciate you adding me. Appreciate the nice comments of my emceeing ability, but thank you, Lori. Let's give her a virtual applause.
Thank you, Brad. And yes, it is the future of analytics.
Exactly. So with that, we are going to take another small break. Again, we're going to get started back at 2:45. We know it's the afternoon. If you have not stood up yet, please stand up, stretch, move around. We have some amazing sessions. Chris is going to come back on stage around to talk attribution. Kent's going to hit on customer or consumer data governance. So very hot topics. We want you to get your questions ready, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.
All right, welcome back, everyone. To close out the content portion of the day, we have two separate topics, two separate sessions, if you will, focused on some hot topics which are really prevalent right now in the CPG industry. The first of those is the one that you're currently in, which is around attribution, successes, and struggles. The second of those, customer data governance, will be led by my colleague Kent here in just a few minutes. So before we dive into the content, I really wanted to spend just about 2 minutes to talk about how we got here. So in the days, weeks, months leading up to this summit, we asked for your direct feedback on 2 different occasions. The first was when you signed up. And in addition to your name, your email, your company name, we asked one question. We asked what you were interested in learning at this summit. Far and away, the number one response that we heard was about attribution-related issues. Customer data governance, as you probably can imagine, was second. Obviously, the range of responses that we got around attribution were very wide-ranging. And so it let us know we kind of needed to dig into this topic a little bit deeper to figure out what you were really looking to hear about. So as a result, about 3 weeks ago, we reached out to you again and asked you to provide examples of successes and struggles that your organization has had with attribution. The results of your responses were very revealing. There were lots of struggles listed and very limited successes. So much so that less than 35% of the responses that we received listed any sort of attribution success at all. But 100% of your responses listed struggles. And taking that a step further, all of those struggles were related to one of 4 individual issues. So given your input, your feedback, and all the information you provided to us, it was clear that we really needed to deep dive into those 4 attribution struggles that you told us you're having. So today, we have a few objectives. First, we'll be reviewing each of those struggles that you mentioned in detail. For each one of them, we'll attempt to identify a root cause to see what's really driving the struggles that you're having with attribution. And then finally, we'll offer a few actionable next steps as we've tried to do in all the sessions so far to help you turn these struggles that you're currently having into future successes. One thing I do want to mention and call out here is that we have a lot of people at this summit today of varying levels of analytics maturity, either from an organizational level or a personal level. And so some of the struggles we're going to talk through are things that you and your organization may have already moved past and conquered, but for others of you, they may be things you've yet to even encounter. So one thing I do want to call out later after this session, after the next hot topic session, we will have a little bit of a talk about some roundtable sessions that we have. We're calling them our CPG Digital Analytics Roundtables, where they're intended to be small groups of individuals in the CPG space who are interested in talking about specific topics like attribution. So that will be a great opportunity for you, if you're interested in those sort of engagements, to sign up and talk with other CPG professionals in your space, similar roles to you, who are interested in talking and in more detail about the things that you're interested in as well. So quickly before we start, I want to level set and just remind everyone of the definition of attribution that we're using. Attribution is the act of assigning credit for conversions on your site to different ads, or not necessarily on your site, but in this case, we're talking about different ads, clicks, and factors along a user's path to completing a conversion. One thing I want to note about this specific definition is that it's not focused only on media. It also includes clicks and other website factors, which are things that we commonly see being overlooked by analytics teams who may be really, really laser focused on just media performance. I wanted to at least call that out in advance, since I know some of you in your feedback, you referenced the attribution of specific website functionalities to conversion goals, and not just obviously media conversions. So with that, let's jump right in. The first attribution struggle that you indicated to us that you have a lot of trouble with is having a lack of knowledge, interest, or demand for attribution within your organization. Now, from a foundational level, this is probably the most basic struggle that we heard from you and that we have in the presentation today. But while I say that this is the most basic struggle, it doesn't mean it's easy to fix, especially if you work in an organization that's not been traditionally data-driven. In reality, there's really two separate issues here. There's a lack of knowledge and a lack of interest. The root causes for those are different as well, which is why I want to break them out separately. First, a lack of knowledge really indicates a gap in either education or communication. Your stakeholders either don't know what attribution is, or they don't understand enough about the concept to realize how attribution can benefit them. This one, as you might expect, is a bit more straightforward to fix. If you're willing to take the time, put in the effort to educate your stakeholders on the concept of attribution and the proper benefits that attribution reporting can bring to them. But what about those stakeholders who do have a knowledge about attribution, but who aren't interested in necessarily utilizing it, setting it up, or trying to take advantage of those attribution insights? Well, in that case, that indicates a gap in the perceived value that these stakeholders have about how attribution can impact the organization. As we've mentioned a couple times through the sessions today, InfoTrust works with dozens of enterprise CPG organizations around the world. And from our experience, we found that this phenomenon typically occurs when people are utilizing finite data points and basically assuming they're telling the whole story about their customer journey. Some of you may have known this topic or this concept as another name, and that's looking at vanity metrics rather than actionable metrics. Now, anytime I talk about vanity metrics, I love to show this awesome cartoon. I won't try and read it all to you. I'll let you read through it on your own. But as you look at it, I'm sure this concept will resonate really strongly with most of you, because far too often, we all have stakeholders within our organizations who are making business decisions on the wrong KPIs. Things like impressions, clicks, view-throughs on media campaigns, or bounce rate for website metrics. While these metrics may obviously have some uses and be valuable in some settings, they really don't do a great job of telling the story about the customer's journey. Yet far too often, we see stakeholders within our organizations who laser focus in on these metrics to tout campaign or website successes, rather than trying to get a holistic view of the customer with more advanced insights through things like attribution modeling. Now, to be clear, lack of interest for attribution is an issue that can be difficult to fix, because essentially what you're trying to do is ask stakeholders to reassess their long-held beliefs about what success means for their campaigns or for their websites. But there's a few steps that I can offer you that can help you close this gap. So number one, look at actionable goals. Align your analytics teams and your media teams on what actionable goals and success actually looks like to measure the success of your campaigns and your site functionalities. Again, stop looking at vanity metrics. Stop having your teams and your partners look at vanity metrics. Work to make this alignment a standard process within your key analytics and media teams to ensure that both teams, not just analytics, not just media, are involved in defining success for your campaigns or new site functionalities. Second, ensure that your analytics platform is properly set up to highlight actionable goals as conversions. In Google Analytics, for those of you who use that refers to the concept of goals. Now, proper setup and configuration of conversion activities actually has two benefits. So number one, it ensures that your stakeholders are seeing actionable data with their reporting. So it basically allows them to see what it looks like to make business decisions on these actionable goals, rather than the finite or vanity metrics that they're used to using for their business decision making. But secondly, a lot of enterprise level analytics tools like Google Analytics tie configured conversions directly into their attribution modeling and reporting. So in order to turn that corner, or to start turning that corner with these stakeholders, make sure that you're configuring your Google Analytics instances correctly so that attribution reporting can be as valuable as possible. Finally, going back to the training, the education, and the knowledge gaps, Make sure you're closing those knowledge gaps by training your key stakeholders on the value of proper measurement. As analytics professionals, it's our responsibility to get our key stakeholders up to speed on how analytics and data can best benefit them. At the end of the day, you're not going to make all of the stakeholders in your organizations experts. But the first step at getting your organization more data-driven is to ensure that key stakeholders are all on the same page about what data is important and what data isn't. So let's look at the second attribution struggle that we heard from you that you were having an issue with within your organizations. You told us that oftentimes your organization is not doing a good job at correctly architecting your campaigns or your websites in order to maximize attribution success. Now, this advances a bit on the previous struggle because in this case, the way that your comments were worded, it at least let us know that in your organizations, or the people who express this as a struggle, your key stakeholders at least know what attribution looks like and the benefits that it can provide. Still, when you think about why this struggle occurs, the root causes are really some foundational issues that can be fixed with better organizational education, better processes, better communications between analytics and media teams. More specifically, when we talk about root causes in this case, the struggle tends to manifest itself basically in two ways. First, there's an inefficient or ineffective tracking of key campaign or user activity touchpoints throughout the customer's journey. For those of you who, again, use Google Analytics, when I mention key user touchpoints, key activity information, those are going to be events in Google Analytics. The second root cause, though, is the ineffective usage of some of the more advanced functionalities of your enterprise's analytics platforms. So let's deep dive first into the tracking side of things. Quite simply, to maximize the value of your digital analytics insights, you need to dedicate time to establishing unique and granular tracking strategies for both your websites and your digital marketing campaigns. This means taking full advantage of campaign or query string parameters, tagging literally every single link pointing from one of your digital media campaigns to your website. When you set this up correctly and you utilize it in a standardized format consistently, these campaign parameters will collect a wealth of granular data about your digital marketing campaigns, which can obviously maximize the value of the insights you get from your attribution reporting. But that's not all. Attribution modeling relies on the presence of conversion activities in order to determine which campaigns or website functionalities are best at driving success. I mentioned this a second ago with the whole education and training piece of the last success. What this means is it's imperative to not only establish those tracking for the key user touch points on your site, but also to flag those conversions events as goals in a tool like Google Analytics. In both of these situations, though, it's not enough to just establish tracking on your websites or your digital campaigns. You have to ensure there are documented standards for both types of tracking, and which are utilized throughout the organizations and by any third-party agencies. If every single market or brand or agency within your organization measures things differently and tracks things differently, you'll never be able to truly assess the aggregate performance of either your digital assets or your conversion success. Finally, I mentioned briefly that we see lots of organizations who are looking to do campaign attributions, but aren't utilizing the more advanced features of their analytics platforms. And this includes things like customizing marketing channel definitions within your analytics platforms. The fact is, most enterprise-level analytics platforms give you the ability to tweak the way that marketing traffic is defined and presented in your reporting. This obviously has a direct impact on attribution modeling, because unless you're customizing these marketing channels for your individual organization, your channel attribution is essentially going to be utilizing the same out-of-the-box tracking that every other organization in the world who hasn't chosen to customize their channel definitions is using. So the last takeaway I'll give you for this struggle is to be sure that you understand how to customize and define the marketing channel definitions in your analytics platform. Again, for a Google Analytics example of this, look at the channel groupings settings within your Google Analytics views. Moving on, the next struggle that many of you indicated you're having is something that wouldn't have made this list if this was the 2016 CPG Digital Analytics Summit. That's because the root cause of this one only surfaced about 3 years ago, but despite that, it's really wreaking havoc on MarTech stacks in almost every industry. I'm talking, of course, about the quote-unquote death of third-party cookies and how their demise is affecting your attribution insights. Chris mentioned this earlier as well during the Nestle conversation that we had, and about how they're being forced to cope with this at this time too. Make no mistake about it, the world here is changing. Consumers are demanding more transparency about the data that we're collecting about them, and more choice and control about how that online data is used. Massive local and regional regulations like GDPR, CCPA, and the like are directly impacting the way that we're able to collect data online and how that data is able to be stored and used legally. With that, technology is changing as well. Web browsers like Safari and Firefox are rolling out sweeping changes to their ecosystem, which either block or limit the impact of third-party cookies. Now, my guess is, if you're one of those here today who indicated you're having this struggle, that you also probably understand some of the ramifications of the technologies like ITP and Safari. If so, and apologies for not being able to get into this deeper, obviously, I think we could probably do a 4-hour summit just on tools like ITP and GDPR and things like that. But my guess is if this is a struggle you're having, that you're probably hoping there's some solution out there which is going to allow you to overcome some of these challenges associated with these changes, either through finding a loophole that's going to allow you to continue using third-party cookies for your remarketing audiences, or trying to find a way to extend conversion windows past 1 day or 7 days for your first-party campaigns in a way that really bypasses those technologies. I'll be honest, when ITP first dropped, we at InfoTrust were also looking for loopholes as well. We were looking for workarounds which would allow our clients and our partners to continue deploying and measuring media the same way they always had. But every single time someone found a loophole or a workaround, it was immediately patched in a subsequent version of ITP. So it's pretty evident at this point that ITP is here to stay. The real question now is, how can you maximize the insights you can get from your digital media despite these new limitations? As you might imagine, working with some of the largest brands in the world, we've seen numerous different techniques being employed by organizations who are looking to continue operating in this new environment with traditional business as usual. But far away, the best recommendation I can give you to mitigate this struggle is to invest in integrated first-party media and measurement platforms. Obviously, I've mentioned today that we have a close partnership with our friends at Google. So in this case, I'll specifically call out Google Marketing Platform as a great candidate, given that Google Analytics, Ads, Display and Video 360, Search Ads 360, Campaign Managers, all of them can be linked together and deployed in a way that allows first-party cookies to be dropped whenever traffic from one of your ads hits your site. While an integrated measurement and media stack doesn't completely overcome the limitations imposed by these new browser technologies and these new regulations, it does ensure that you're at least able to maximize your conversion look-back windows, which took a major hit with the advent of things like ITP. This, of course, gives you the best chance to obtain valuable attribution insights from your media campaigns. Beyond just attribution, though, integrated measurement and media platforms have other powerful benefits, with one of them being the ability to create and develop audiences of real users. We talked about this earlier with Arif, that can be created based on what happens on your website and then exported into these media platforms for use in remarketing campaigns and in order to optimize lookalike audiences and things like that. And then that kind of sets this amazing cycle into place where enterprise analytics is powering media and media provides more data to analytics that can then be used to further the cycle of continuous optimization. So that takes us to our final attribution struggle of the day. And I'll be honest, this is the big one. Far and away, the most mentioned topic that we had request to talk about at this summit is a problem that's plagued CPG organizations since websites became a thing. Quite simply, it's the ability to reliably attribute offline purchases back to online campaigns and user activities. Again, Chris from Nestle directly mentioned this as a massive struggle for their organization earlier. And I know from reading your feedback that many, many of you share the same problem. Now, for those of you who have been in the industry for some time, we like to call this the white whale of CPG analytics professionals. As Webster says, this is the objective that's relentlessly and obsessively pursued, but difficult to achieve. But let's think about why it's so difficult. Through my experience working with CPG organizations around the world, I've heard lots of analytics professionals lament over why it's so hard for their organizations to establish any sort of reliable offline to online measurement insights. Some professionals point to the fact that their organization doesn't control the point of sale. And really, there's no way for them to engage with the end customer during that last mile to determine why they chose a specific product or why they chose to buy it at that specific time. Further, others in the industry are continually frustrated by the lack of their visibility into detailed retailer sell-through data. Because, let's be honest, the vast majority of retailers are kind of unwilling to provide more than just cursory metrics about the demographics or buying patterns of individual groups or customers. But my question to you is this: are either of these really the root cause of the problem? My answer is no. To find the real root cause, we need to dig one layer deeper and consider that any successful offline to online measurement requires some form of unifying user level data to be present across the entire customer journey, both offline and online. Quite frankly, if you can find a way to do this reliably and consistently, you've solved the offline to online measurement problem. But this is obviously a difficult task, right? Especially when the majority of CPG organizations don't have direct retail outlets in which they sell their products in. They don't directly control the final touch point, that last mile with the consumer when they're making their purchase. With that said, we at InfoTrust have worked with many different organizations to begin solving this problem over the last few years. And so I want to quickly talk about some of the tactics, 3 separate tactics, in fact, that we've helped other CPG organizations set up to begin maximizing offline purchase success. The first solution I want to talk about is store visits, which is a feature within Google Analytics. Now, my guess from knowing many of you and talking through similar technologies time and time again is that many of you probably didn't even know there was a store visits feature within GA. Which honestly makes sense, given that very few of those of you on the call today can really take advantage of. Quite simply, organizations, in order to utilize store visits, you really have to have multiple physical retail locations that you own, so owned retail outlets, before you can start activating the store visits data. If you do, though, what happens is that you can begin collecting data in GA about the estimated number of users who visit your website and then visit one of your physical locations within 30 days. So, sounds cool, right? Keep in mind, though, when you're trying to model conversions with store visits, that it's not an exact science. At the end of the day, there's still no user level data there that's mapping the online and offline activities to one another. The data in GA are simply estimates in this case. So make sure to treat those as such if you do have the ability to utilize store visits and are considering using these types of insights to make business decisions. Second potential solution, which can add value from an offline to online standpoint, are quite simply advanced data science modeling techniques. The ones that our data science team at InfoTrust believes are the most insightful and provide the most value are what are called time series or econometric modeling. For someone like me who doesn't have a data science background, just trying to say that last sentence was tough. So I'm going to try to break this down as simply as possible in a way that really doesn't make our data scientists cringe here. So essentially what a team of advanced analysts, of data scientists can do is combine offline in-store purchase information with online data about an organization's website or media activities. Then using techniques like time series modeling or econometric modeling, the teams are able to correlate key online activities with offline sales. Notice here, though, that I said correlate, not anything about causation. And this is because, again, precise attribution of online activities to offline sales still requires user-level data. So that takes me to my third potential solution, and it'll show why that's so impactful. Far and away, the biggest success that we've seen organizations have with offline to online is what I like to call personalized promotions. Using personalized promotions, an organization digitally distributes dynamic, personalized offers to their users through the use of loyalty programs or other user login functionalities. What happens is these users then download or print these offers, personalized offers, and visit a physical retail store to make a purchase. Of course, they're also redeeming that personalized offer in the process, and the organization then receives that redemption data back from the retailers about which personalized offers were redeemed. At that point, the organization has what it needs from a data standpoint to import the data back into the analytics platform and integrate that offline purchase data with the online data that's already stored in Google Analytics or in other tools. This allows the organization to get really granular attribution data about the users themselves or the campaigns which bring those users to the site initially in order to download the personalized offer. To close out this concept, though, I'd be remiss if I didn't note that this technique, while it sounds great and can be incredibly impactful, it obviously has some deficiencies as well. For one, it's quite simply infeasible for organizations to distribute offers for every single product they manufacture and sell. And so this still won't give you a complete offline to online measurement picture. With that said, if you're an organization who's launching a new product or looking to ramp up sales of an existing product through limited time discounts or special offers, the personalized promotion technique can give you real, tangible attribution insights about the digital marketing campaigns which most contributed to your offline sales. So that concludes today's first hot topic session on attribution. If you do have any questions or would like to network, I would love to hear from you. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn using the URL that I've listed there on the screen. But to close out, my hope is, like the other sessions we've talked about today, that each of you can take something actionable from this discussion and begin immediately maximizing the insights that you can get from attribution reporting. So at this point, let me pass the baton, if you will, over to my colleague, Kent Oldham, who will lead us through our second hot topic session of the day.
Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate it. So let me quickly introduce myself. Kent Oldham from InfoTrust. You'll notice the title of this is Customer, and then in parentheses, I put Consumer Data Governance. And I think that's really relevant given what we heard earlier from our friends at Estee Lauder in terms of how they think about it and use the term consumer. I'll say a little bit more about that. But real quick introduction of myself. I am the Chief Operating Officer and Head of Customer Data Governance here at InfoTrust. I had a lovely and fun career at a company called Procter & Gamble. There I retired with 30 years of service, and the last role I had for about a decade was being the IT owner of all the consumer-facing websites. So on any given day, that was about 1,000 websites, and that included dev, ops, privacy, security, accessibility, and tags. So You also see this little emblem there that says Mason Bands that you may or may not be able to read, which points to my shirt. Shout out to all my band friends. I have 3 kids in bands, so I always have to do shout outs. Next slide, please. Awesome. All right, so these are the popular questions that we as an organization get on a daily basis. They are coming to us in many different forms, but I really just kind of want to run through them real quickly and talk about each one a bit more in depth. And then if we have time for questions, we'll do that. So the popular questions are, what's the current privacy landscape? Well, the good news is we got a great overview of that from Bridget earlier in terms of what's happening, but I'll touch some other items. Where do we start this journey? That's always a very popular question. Any organizational tips? We'll make sure we do that. How do we go about customer data governance or consumer data governance? We'll make sure we hit that. Anything special about tags? And last but not least, why now? All right, so quickly from a privacy landscape standpoint, I think everybody knows, and again, repeating a bit of what was already said, but I think it's helpful context. Things really got started in Europe with GDPR. With GDPR, there was a lot of precedence and excitement around it. That precedence and excitement has literally taken off in many parts of the world, and I'll bring that all to life here in a second. But the way that's come to life in other parts of the world, if we go to the next slide, is if we look at the United States, we're all very familiar, well, a lot of us are familiar with CCPA based out of California. So California has kind of created the benchmark in terms of what does privacy legislation look like at the state level. What people don't always realize is just how prevalent and active the other states are in terms of trying to bring some of the similar type legislation to life. So what you're looking at here is a snapshot from IAPP, and this is recent, I think, as summer of this month. And it shows you the fact that there's actually 3 states that have signed legislation in place. 5, interestingly enough, states decided they were going to go a different route and actually just have a committee handle the or a task force handle this versus actually having legislation. But we don't see this trend slowing down in any fashion whatsoever. In fact, there's lots of conversations right now around, hey, should the federal government come in? And having worked at a large company before, I would have never said legislation from the federal government would have been welcome, at least within the United States. But given the fact that these states are starting to take slightly different approaches to it, that may be something that is very well going to be welcomed by businesses if it in fact does happen. And there tends to be a bit of a momentum around that. Next slide, please. Now, the part that I think a lot of people get is GDPR, great. CCPA, great. Stuff is happening in the United States, awesome. But just how broad this is on a global basis. This visual, and I highly recommend that you check this out. The source is down below. You can filter based on parts of the world, and it provides you very great visuals, as well as the detailed data that you can see blown out there that I have specifically focused on Africa. But the part that catches a lot of people off guard is just how much legislation is out there. So 66% of countries in the world have legislation. There are 10% more that have draft legislation. Of course, there are going to be some that don't have it. And then my favorite category is countries with no data. That was actually a smaller number than I had expected. I was expecting maybe there might be more countries without data, but it is what it is. And I was thinking that might be related to Africa. But if we go to the next slide and do a kind of a deeper dive on Africa, I really wanted to share this story because it impacts us here at InfoTrust in multiple ways. So the gentleman taking the picture, so it's a selfie with a bunch of other children. I call him a young man because he is relatively young. But this gentleman took it upon himself to try to make sure that he could feed the children in his village. And he's an amazing man because effectively he single-handedly took in all of these individuals, has created the youth home that you see pictured here with the name there. And the number of, unfortunately, orphan children grows on a daily basis. But the reason why it's important to us is we have a personal relationship with these group of individuals. Part of the InfoTrust Foundation has donated so that they can have more sustainable forms of food, like a rabbit farm. But bringing it back to the topic of data and privacy, I was actually surprised that data legislation is in process in Uganda. Now, maybe I just am naive. I have traveled the planet. I have traveled a lot of different countries, but I was a bit taken back that, wow, there's legislation actually happening in places like Uganda. But if you think about it, so this, again, amazing young man, he has a smartphone. So not only is he taking videos and capturing pictures, he has a very active LinkedIn profile, data. He and I personally communicate back and forth on WhatsApp. So again, data. So my point is the amount of data and the widespreadness of it across the globe just continues to grow, even in places you might not expect it. And again, that's really leading to this, we have data, we need to make sure we take care of the individuals that are associated with that, and therefore the legislation that possibly goes with it. Next slide. So kind of hitting the big questions that we get in terms of, all right, that's great, here's the landscape, but kind of give us some of the nitty gritty in terms of all the way from the beginning to the end. So let's dive into each of these areas. The first one is, where do we start? And yes, there's a lot on this slide, but I'm not going to walk through all of it. The key concepts that I really want you to take away from this, and we heard this from our friends at Nestle, which it really starts with kind of data governance and the data as the foundation. And the way we think about it, and there are lots of ways to think about it, but the way we think about it, especially within the CPG industry, is there is all the things that Chris just talked about in terms of what's happening to cookies. There's the legislation that I mentioned. So there's a fairly dominant shift to saying we really need to get our acts together from a first-party consumer or customer data standpoint. So as we think about data governance, it's really saying, all right, how do we consistently and accurately collect that first-party data while respecting exactly what consumers or customers are very willing to say what we can do with their data. You also have the third-party data kind of over on the other side of the foundation there that says we want to make sure that what we're getting is consistent and accurate, right? So if we're going to be using tags or pixels to collect data, we want to make sure they're functioning properly and collecting the data we really want them to be collecting. And then we want to make sure that all of this data, we know where it sits within our various enterprises. So within a large enterprise, whether it be CPG, multi-brand, yes, some of those can be small enterprises, but typically they're larger enterprises because of the multi-brand or multi-property standpoint. It's not always an easy challenge to say, where's all this data? Anyway, all of this kind of ladders up to integrated data and analytics, which really then feed kind of three core areas that really drives this whole question of where do we start? One of them being, what is your objective, right? And so we've heard that a couple times today. It could be, hey, we want to make sure we have the best consumer experiences possible. And there are some questions there that kind of lead you in terms of how to think about that. It could be, hey, we really want to be driving marketing ROI, which we heard a little bit about earlier as well. And there's some questions associated with that. The part that I've been focusing on is kind of in the center, which is, hey, we want to make sure that we are actually prepared, very prepared, for these kind of ever-increasing policies and legislation that are headed our direction. So it all comes back to, what's your purpose? What are you trying to achieve? And there's no reason why you couldn't try to do more than one. Next slide, please. This is one of my favorite topics. I will try to be brief on it, but my favorite question I get is, are there any organizational tips? We heard from, again, our friends at Nestle. They were in a very fortunate spot. We don't always hear everybody as being in that kind of a fortunate position. Even the question of like, who was the champion? They didn't need it because they all got along so well. That is amazing. It's not always that simple though. So as we talk to clients or potential clients, they're always asking, so who needs to be involved and who's in charge, all of those kind of things. What we do is we make sure we meet the clients where they're at, but we always say the same thing, which is this has to be, especially in a large organization, a multifunctional effort. There's no getting around it. So the ones that are typically involved, legal, info security, if there are governance teams, making sure they're involved, the business. So there could be multiple businesses. So it could be multiple brands, multiple service lines, making sure they're involved. Through that, we also need to make sure we have a decision maker. And again, I find it interesting that some organizations are blessed with the fact they can work together so well. They don't need a single decision maker, but we have found it to be useful to have a single decision maker. And quite often that's within the business. But again, that will vary from organization to organization. Now, I have this thing called CIO/CEO with a question mark over on the left-hand side. That is there because, well, people don't always involve that level with the activities that they're doing, but we highly recommend it. Why? If something were to happen and you hit the news, guess who gets to go out and talk to the press and say, here's what we're going to do about it. So we highly recommend it. We don't always see that level of engagement, but we highly recommend it. So our organizational tips are make sure you get all the key multifunctional players in place. Make sure you have a conversation or a channel to the CIO or CEO, and make sure you know who's going to be the decision maker in the organization. Next slide. So how do we go about customer data governance? Wow. So this is a monster topic in terms of process. The process can be many things, and we heard some of the process associated specifically with tags, but a simple framework that I kind of put here on the screen is it's literally starting with knowing what you have in terms of where are all the data assets or where's all the consumer information, all the way to get in control and then being able to manage that from an ongoing standpoint. So it really starts with, all right, what the heck do we know? What the heck do we not know? And if you can knock all three of these out of the ballpark, you literally end up with and we heard of this again today, which is wonderful, ongoing data management is kind of a way of life, right? So you're not going back, you're not doing audits over and over. You do an audit, you make sure you have the processes and the systems and the alerts in place that allow you to stay in control. So it is a very process intensive effort, I'm not gonna lie. It has a fair amount of people involved with it, fine. But there are tools, and those are mentioned as well, one of which is ours, Tag Inspector, that can actually help with that and bring these to life such that those processes are not only documented, but then brought to life within the appropriate technology and the appropriate exposure and appropriate communication channels to be able to stay in control. Next slide. So I often get the question of what is the scope of data governance, and is there anything specific or special about tags? Kind of going back to my earlier point in terms of knowing where all that data sits within an organization, customer or consumer data, it can sit in a lot of places. So don't think that my little drawing, and yes, it's my drawing, so feel free to make fun of it. Don't think that it is just in one place and life is good. It's not usually that simple. And I'm assuming all of you, since you're within the CPG industry, have some experience with, yeah, there are lots of different groups who have data sitting in different locations. So these are just some examples, all the way from data lakes to DMPs to CDPs. So as you think about kind of where's that data actually sitting, you then have all sorts of applications. So they're leveraging that data in a variety of ways. Something as quote unquote simple as dashboards or doing some of the analytics that was just discussed by Chris. And then you also have things that are very consumer facing or customer facing, like websites, apps, IoT devices, the list goes on and on. So the scope can be all of this or anything that actually has consumer data. But it can also just start with certain areas, and quite often we do see people starting with things like tags. So if you kind of click on the next build, Brad. So to the topic of, is there anything special about tags? The answer is yes. So all of these kind of data platforms or databases, that's data that's sitting someplace, fine, it's at rest, it might be moving. You have the applications that are using this. You have your consumer-facing assets. But when you hear somebody talking about 1 million visitors to a site on, pick your frequency, the thing that is kind of special about tags is you have this continual flow of information going back and forth between marketing platforms as well as other platforms that is containing information typically based on the user activity, and it's going back to these platforms. So what's unique about that is, one, understanding what's all on your site, but then also understanding what is all that data that's flowing back and forth between, and are you good with it, right? So you need to make sure that you're okay with that information that's flowing. And yes, there are ways to find out what that is. All right, next slide. So why now? So I loved the reference, and we really appreciate it from Paul in terms of what we've referred to as pace and payoff. The time to purpose is what I have put here, but it really goes back to what is your objective? And we also heard that from our friends at Estee, which was the why, right? So if we go back to the why, the purpose, that time that you get there is valuable. So it's either valuable in terms of, all right, we have all the consumer data or more consumer data or the right amount of consumer data when we want it to be able to do what we want to do, or, oh crap, we might have places where data leakage is happening through potential tags or something else that we need to clean up. So it really goes to, what is your purpose? How fast do you want to get there? I can honestly say that I believe across the board, everybody we start with, the typical sentiment is, wow, we wish we would have started earlier. So why now? Well, there's lots of reasons to go now, and potentially even earlier, but earlier has passed. So it's all about getting going now. All right, next slide. So kind of putting it all together, if you were paying close attention, what you would have noticed in the bottom of kind of each of those questions, I was putting purpose, people, processes, platform, payoff, and pace and payoff. Processes, that could be technologies. So we heard that earlier today in terms of the different platforms, the technology stacks that actually exist. But they kind of neatly fit into these buckets of why, who, how, scope, and then why now. If you could do the build real quick. So this fits really nice into the 6 Ps of digital analytics transformations, again, that was referenced by Paul earlier today. In terms of, and it's not by accident that we've come up with this methodology, it's just by observation. It is very consistent that we see more and more of these, especially as enterprises mature, starting to touch all of these or ask all of these questions. Now, should you be concerned if you're saying, oh crap, we're only talking about the process, we haven't fully flushed out all the people involved or all the platforms involved? No, not an issue. Again, I'm a big fan of getting started, learning, and pivoting. So just kind of wanted to bring it to life in terms of all of those questions. They kind of fit into those nice buckets, and they fit very nicely into the 6 Ps of digital analytics transformation. So with that, if memory serves me, I think we're at questions. Yes. So before we go to that Peloton slide, I see this is an overwhelming but critical topic. What is the first step that can help me take the first step? So what's the baby step before the first step? That's a fantastic question. What I would recommend is really starting with who in the organization has passion for this? What are you hearing? All leading to that purpose. So very specifically, in large organizations, it goes by different terms, squeaky wheel, where the energy is flowing, right? Really understanding like what's driving that, and embracing that. So if somebody is saying, hey, let's pick on performance, right? Hey, performance on our websites is a potential issue. Great place to start. People are saying, wow, we really want to make sure we're getting the best ROI we can, understanding what's happening in terms of your marketing tags and capturing the information you want. Another great place to start. So it really kind of depends on what purpose you have. But if there's somebody in that organization or your organization who's raising their hand, talking about one of those, embrace that, run with that, start where you can. Because again, the entire wheel will eventually get filled out, but getting going is important. Hopefully that helps. Let me see, I think I see some other questions. No, I don't. I was looking at the chat. Oh, I do see a question. Okay. I don't work for a large enterprise. Can you explain how I can make this an important topic at my organization? Yes, absolutely. So, and I don't want to use the scare tactic of legislation. We all know that fear motivates. So one option, that's not my preferred option. My preferred option would be to take one of those examples of what makes sense for your organization, especially if it's a small organization. If you are small, you're selling products, or you're small, one of your key objectives is to have that high engagement on your websites, embrace that and literally just start with that. So say, all right, this is our goal, and frame it up to say, hey, we know how we can help bring this goal to life, and bring it to the individual or individuals who are A, willing to hear about it, or B, talking about it, right? So it's really embracing what I'll call that path of least resistance. We heard Paul talk about the speed of organizations, the pre-meetings, the meetings, and after the meetings. Well, there are other dynamics in companies, small and large, right? So you just want to make sure that you embrace those dynamics and you are able to run with the purpose or the person who is raising those ideas, embrace that kind of conversation that Paul had, and go. Everything that Paul said about organizations, honestly, unless you are probably a single person organization, I think it applies to just about everybody. With CCPA enacted, do you think there will ever be national privacy regulation or only state by state? So this is a prediction. I have lots of predictions. So InfoTrust does not provide legal guidance. We do not provide guidance in terms of what will be happening. But as an individual, I can say I have several thoughts and predictions as it relates to this. I actually think a national privacy regulation will come to bear. And the reason why I think that is, right or wrong, businesses have a say of what happens with our government, specifically within Washington. And I know that as we talk to clients, there's more comfort because people are becoming aware of and comfortable with there's GDPR, there's CCPA. So if we stay US focused, there's CCPA. Becoming more focused in terms of how do we deal with that? How do we think about it? There's lots of communications and things that you can learn about it. But I also hear all the concerns in terms of, oh crap, other states are coming out with these things. What do we need to be doing? And wouldn't it just be easier if there was one set of rules to follow? So again, given the power of companies within the United States, I would be a betting person that lobbying and conversations are happening with businesses actually pushing this topic at the national level to say, hey, yes, we think this would be of value. And we think this would be a value not just to your constituents, but we think it would be a value to us as businesses. So I think the answer is yes. I have another prediction, which is, again, 100% conspiracy, but since we're on the topic of CCPA, and I call it conspiracy because, again, it's just my thought, and who knows what will actually happen. But one of the things that I am a bit concerned about is what if some of these states start thinking about some of these regulations as a profit center? So we know not all the states are in great financial situations right now, just given everything that's going on. This would be potentially an easy way to go and extract money to fill the coffers. Now, will we see that? I don't know. If it's done at a national level, I would think that would remove those kind of concerns, because, you know, right or wrong, the national or the national level, things operate at a much higher level from a dollar standpoint, but we will see. So more than you asked, but yes, I actually predict one is coming. Love to talk about Man Uganda. You mentioned a foundation. Does InfoTrust have a foundation? Miranda, yes, we do. I really appreciate you asking that. I'm not sure what the best way, if there's a way for us to actually post a link to our foundation, that would be great. If not, we can make sure that we provide that to you afterwards. But yes, we do have a foundation. It's a very active foundation. Full transparency, it's a core value of ours in terms of making sure that we give back to the communities that we are in, as well as other communities. So really, really appreciate you asking that. Actually, it says, I got a quick text that says infotrust.foundation. So easy way to find it. All right. It is time for a break. So we will take about 5 minutes. And before you run away, 2 things I request that you do. 1, make sure you sign up for our upcoming CPG roundtable. You can see the address there. Personally, I have done some CPG roundtables, and they are a lot of fun. I've done it on behalf of InfoTrust, but the individuals who are there, it's a great learning experience. People gain a lot from each other throughout those conversations. So please do that. And then please fill out the survey. We love feedback. We love feedback more than you can probably imagine. And we want to make sure that, you know, we'll be able to connect with you. So feel free to reach out to any of us. So let's see. We want to hear from you. Please fill out this form. Yes, exactly. So with that, I think we'll take a break. 5 minutes is my understanding. So I'm kind of going off script. So let's come back in at 3:50. So that's a little more than 5. Correct me if I'm wrong, somebody quickly in the chat. And then we will do the drum roll and the raffle drawing. Awesome. Thank you.
All right, we're in. Welcome back, everybody. Wow, Chris, we did it. I was thinking through the break about our book we launched and think it's just fantastic that all the topics, all the speakers, all the great discussion that we had is really about how we as organizations and CPG and multi-brand advance the way we use analytics to drive more, efficient and effective marketing. So the crawl walk run is very relevant. I'm excited for everybody to get their hands on a copy of that. So again, thank you for sending over where we should send the book. Also, I appreciated the engagement from everyone. I can't imagine how big this event's going to be in 2021. Fingers crossed we can do this in person in New York like it was originally planned. And thanks to our team at InfoTrust, our partner at Google, and all of our amazing speakers. So Paul and Lori at Google, Kason and Bridget at Estee Lauder, Chris and Arif at Nestle Health Science. We appreciate you. So again, final housekeeping tips. As your official MC, I am now in the book. I'm ready for my second tryout. Make sure you sign up for a CPG Roundtable, much smaller groups, much more in-depth conversations from learning and networking from key stakeholders like yourself. 2, we love feedback. Please take the time. You took 4 hours today. Take the time, share feedback. Let us know if you want to be a keynote for next year. We'd love to have you make this bigger and better event next year. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to who kicked us off, Chris Vaughn, and we're going to do the Peloton raffle. So Chris, I'm pretty excited about this, and good luck, everyone. There's a lot of names on there.
Let's do it. Yeah, lots of names. Nobody wants to hear from me at this point anymore. So I'm just going to go ahead and do what it says and click to spin. Good luck, everyone. Let's give it about 20 seconds and see who comes out on top here.
I feel like everybody's standing up now. They're like zooming in on their screen. Like, come on.
Slowing down here. Who do we got? Looks like Shelby Haraway. I hope I pronounced your name right, from Del Monte. So congratulations, Shelby. Our team will be getting in touch with you with the information that you provided when you registered and filled out the form today and figure out where we need to ship your Peloton. So congratulations. And for the rest of you, apologies that the luck didn't swing your way, but there's always next year. As Brad mentioned, we'll be back next year to do this again, bigger and better, hopefully even more prizes. So awesome. Brad, any last words from you before we let everyone get back to tackling emails?
No, thank you, everyone. Immediate feedback, take action from this. It was 4 hours out of your day. We're all extremely busy. Write down a couple of things that you learned today, and you can take back to your organization, to your team. We do have recordings of this. Look forward to sharing that out. We will share a summary as well, so you can share with leadership, team members. But thank you for everyone behind the scenes that operated this. Thank you for being nice for my first MC appearance. And thank you to all the speakers, especially and attendees. So take care. Have a good rest of your week. And we look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.